Welcome
Welcome
back to the
back.
Catnip Hour. I'm the police, ready to kick down Dan Schneider's front door.
And my childhood is ruined. And
Yep.
it's just it's just this whole episode.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot.
Yeah. It really is. I guess we should probably maybe I will do it in the description as well, but we should probably put like a trigger warning. I mean,
Yes, a
obviously, if you've seen this
disclaimer.
documentary, a good disclaimer. Like, obviously, we don't have like a big audience, but if
Yeah.
you happen to listen to this, just know that this is going to be very heavy subject matter. A lot of talk of sexual
Yes.
assault, child abuse,
Yes.
racism, sexism, just everything under the
Everything you
sun.
can think of, it's
Yeah,
probably in there.
yeah. And then we'll also have something in the description. So
So
today we're
we're
going to be
yes.
discussing the new Nickelodeon. Well, it's mostly yeah, it's Nickelodeon. It's
Yeah.
mostly on Dan Schneider and
Some of the
other people that work with.
producers and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they are LPAs.
Yeah.
Quiet on Set is what it's called.
Yeah, the dark side of kids TV, right?
Yep,
Yep.
yep. It premiered on the ID network, I
Oof.
believe, but now it is also on Discovery Plus and then
HBO.
also
Oh,
HBO.
oh, excuse me.
Exactly.
Sorry, Max.
Yeah, I'm just gonna call it. I've called it HBO to this day. I know that Max is the whole thing. Like it was Cinemax, which I recently found out. I didn't know that initially.
Oh,
That's why. Yeah, yeah,
but
right.
then what?
Like
So it's HBO Cinemax, and then they just shortened it to
Cinemax
Max, I
was like
guess.
a network on its own as well, like a channel or like
Oh
a
yeah,
subscription that you
and
would
it
get.
says you can watch it
So
on YouTube TV. Hulu apparently has it.
really? Okay,
Oh,
they're just
I didn't check, but
by all means, please distribute it. I want anybody to be able to. I wish they would just put it for free, like anywhere,
I
like you know.
wish yes.
Yeah.
It's
So we both watched
oof.
this over the course of
Premiered,
about
yeah,
2 days.
yeah, premiered on Sunday,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and then that was the first two episodes, and then Monday was the last two episodes.
Yeah. But then if you watch it on HBO, you can just kind of like, or any streaming service, you can just
Just
kind of
skip the
binge it all
ads.
together.
Yeah.
But they did release it over the course of 2 days.
Yes.
So yeah,
It
I mean, maybe we wanted to start with like our connection to like Nickelodeon. Like, did you watch
I
Nickelodeon like a lot as a kid?
oh, I every a lot of the TV shows that they were mentioning were the
Mm-hmm.
ones that I watched constantly.
Yeah,
They
me as well.
mentioned obviously the Man Show and all
All
that.
that.
iCarly
Like,
was like briefly mentioned.
yep. Drake and
Um,
Josh,
Drake and
obviously.
Josh, Zoe
Uh,
101 was on there.
Victorious.
I loved
And
Victorious.
yeah.
That was
Yeah,
that was
I was
great.
honestly, I think that's when I started to fall off of Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
I think iCarly was like the last show that I remember regularly watching. Victorious, I didn't really watch as much. I
I
knew some of the jokes and things. Yeah.
After Victorious, I kind of stopped. I tried watching Sam and Cat, never got into it. It wasn't funny.
Mm-mm. It
But
seemed like a bizarre pairing. Like I don't know
yeah,
how they ended up. Like I know they had a crossover episode, so that's on Victorious, I
yeah,
think,
and then so
and that's where it
Victorious
started.
ended, and I think she became famous. And then I guess Sam or Carly left to go live with her dad or something. So
Hmm.
iCarly, the web show ended. So then Sam needed to do something else with her life, and somehow they ended up together. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But
But
like I said, Victorious, I found like I would see clips of like later on, and then
yes,
obviously Sam and Cat. I don't think I even really knew that it existed until like years later. Like I
yeah,
never watched it at all.
I tried, and it
And
was not. I think they tried too hard to make something out of like the two funny secondary characters, and it just didn't work out.
yeah, but aside from Victorious and Sam and Cat, all the other shows that were mentioned on the stock, I frequented. I watched a
Yes.
lot. I was a big Nickelodeon kid.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, for me, it was between my like three like networks that I like watched a lot was Nickelodeon, Disney, and then I was a big PBS kid,
Yep.
like
Yes.
Arthur, Zoom, all of
Oh
that.
yes. Yep.
Yeah, which we will get into in future episodes. There's a lot of things to talk about, but today Nickelodeon is the focus. So I did kind of like I was just on in work today. I was just kind of like basically just putting down like bullet points because like this
Hmm.
documentary does function in a timeline
Oh
format. Like
yeah.
they kind of do like bits and pieces where they do jump back and forth, but for the most part they do. kind of stick to like a timeline. So I don't know if we just want to
Oh yeah.
I'll just
So
bring up
go,
the
yeah,
first
start off.
thing that comes up is the original All That is basically what comes up
Mhm.
first. Like the OG one with Amanda Bynes and all of
Oh
them.
yeah.
So what are we gonna even start doing here? I just kind of wrote down uh I don't even
It
know.
was a
Like we
rough,
have like
yeah, so at least from what I gathered from the documentary, there
yeah.
was Brandy was in. That was her timeline, right?
Yes. Well she was in the Amanda show. That was the Amanda show,
Yeah.
I believe. The
Uh,
girl
yeah.
Brandy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she started out on all that and then transitioned maybe. Um,
I believe so. Yeah, I wrote down. I mean, I kind of just wrote down like. I mean, I remember. Let me bring up the cast from like the original, like all that, so we can like.
yes. It Let me tell you, it was rough seeing the stuff that went on.
Mhm.
All that had 11 seasons. That's crazy.
Yeah, because it was weird. It like went away, and when the Amanda Show kind of came out, like it kind of like overshadowed it, and then I
Yeah.
feel like it kind of came back, which is basically what they
Yep.
did. Like it was like because I remember if you remember the one girl that was on the original All That, I believe her name was Katrina Johnson.
Yes.
You
Hmm.
remember if you were talking about how she had initially been like before Amanda came into these like guys of Nickelodeon, Katrina was kind of like the Amanda quote unquote
Yes.
of all that. And then she like went through puberty and got quote unquote too old. So then
Yes. And then
and
yeah,
mhm,
so they treated her like she was the golden child. And then
mhm.
they called her fat, I think.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
happened was they basically called her mom and said, "Hey, she's getting too fat. Like she needs to be
yeah,
skinnier." And
mhm,
then the following year, she hit puberty, and then all of a sudden, she looked grown up, and she was too grown up for their liking.
yeah,
So that's when they started bringing in someone like Amanda, who was
mhm,
young, fresh. She looked the part, and then
yeah,
towards the end, they kind of phased Katrina out because they didn't need her.
yeah. Which is literally because I remember the first couple of things that they bring up is um, how Dan Schneider would always pick favorites,
Mm-hmm.
and that was evident from the beginning. Yeah, I'm looking at the original cast of all that, and the cast were Angelique Bates, who they barely talked about. So I don't know if she just didn't get the spotlight as much, which is evident
Yeah.
in like I don't know if you remember later on when they mentioned like the kid Leon in the new all
Yes.
that,
Yep.
and then Raquel, how Dan had just like this blatant racism that took
Oh,
place.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. Like remember how the one girl from the Amanda Show, she got like a birthday cake, and then he was like, "Oh, it's too big. This is too much."
Yeah,
And then it
she
was like,
would.
he
They.
wouldn't say that about like Amanda,
Oh no.
So,
But yeah, Katrina
so the
Johnson was the one that was ended up being too old for
yeah,
their
and
liking. But a year prior, she was young enough, just not skinny enough. So then she
right,
hit puberty, got skinny, and all of a sudden she's too old.
yeah,
Like it doesn't make
yeah.
any sense. Like that. That I don't know.
Well, it just shows this the scrutiny that they were under
Oh
constantly.
yeah.
Like they were supposed to fit this one mold of like being like you stay young forever, blah blah blah. Like it's
I
creepy in itself
Do
to
they
think about that.
understand how aging works?
Evidently not. Which is like even like creepy when we get into the whole thing about the pedophilia of it all. It's like,
Oh yeah.
ugh,
Oh God.
like.
Yeah.
So the original, I just want to read the original cast of all that was Angelique Bates, Lori Beth Denberg, if you remember
Oh
her.
yeah. Was she the
Yep.
one that was bigger?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and that was the one that they brought up. Dan Schneider said the despicable thing of when Katrina was getting a little bit heavier. They were like, "We already have a quote
Oh
unquote
yeah.
fat one, a
Yeah.
fat
You
one. We
have the
don't need another
token
one."
fat girl, and you
Which I'm like,
also can't
"Fuck you,
be.
dude."
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that was also Keenan and Kel also started on the original All That.
Yep.
And then we had Alicia Reyes, who I don't really remember. They didn't really bring up, so I don't know if she just didn't go through some of the issues or if she wasn't on the show long enough. And then
Yeah. I don't remember her
Josh
either.
Server, Josh Server, if
Hmm.
you remember him, he had like the dark hair.
Oh yeah. He was in a lot of
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, they also didn't mention him. Again, with these other people were not some of the people have come forward to talk about their stories. Maybe some people might have chosen to not speak, so who
Oh,
knows what
yeah.
if there was more that went on that we didn't even know about. But
And there
those are the original
probably
cast.
was, and I do feel like good for Drake for speaking up, but, like, would I be able to speak up if that were me? I have no idea. So some of these
Yeah,
kids
I mean, you don't know
probably
until you're in the situation.
yeah.
You have no idea how you're gonna react.
And now, Drake's old enough where he feels like he can, but some of
Yeah.
these people probably it was their whole lives like, no.
Mhm. Yeah. The other thing that I want to bring up about all that, I believe this is from the like newer cast of all that, but the one bit where the well not bit the section of the documentary where the and I was a guess because I remember watching both the original cast and the new one, and I don't know if I was just too young to like understand a lot of these like jokes that they were putting jokes. I'm not gonna call them jokes. It's just gross innuendos that don't need to be anywhere
Yes.
near a kid show. But the first thing that had me like jaw dropped the gasp is when the one all that cast member Leon talked about how they constantly put him in superhero outfits. He was in tights. Everything was
Yes.
like really inappropriate. He's like, I was going through puberty. I was feeling really weird about my body, and then
Yes.
here I am constantly have to be dressing up like a superhero for some reason. He's like, I
Oh
just
yeah, and
felt like that
then
was
he's
inappropriate and
also
weird.
the one that said they obviously the one thing wasn't he like a turd, I think.
No, that was the kid, Brian, I
Oh
believe.
yes. Okay.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
that
they were both
kid.
a part of the new cast.
Yes.
I don't believe that there was any black males a part of the original cast, like
No.
black male cast
Besides
members.
like
I don't think so.
Keenan and Kel.
And no, Keenan and Kel, but
Yeah.
they were not in this documentary at all,
No.
basically. So I don't know if they just didn't. Again, I don't know if they just didn't go through any of this or they don't want to talk about it. Obviously, everybody has the right to talk
Oh
about it if
yeah.
they want to, but I guess maybe they just didn't want to share or didn't have
Yeah.
anything to share. So they were the only black men in the original cast, and then the newer cast had the kid Leon and Brian. So
Yes.
yeah, they both experienced wearing
Rach.
like having to go like
Yeah.
going through well yeah racial profiling obviously, and then having to wear like tight clothes while going through puberty. And it was just like unnecessary. Like the one kid was
Yes.
like, I had this like skit where I was a fetus.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh
And I remember
god.
watching that when I was younger.
I don't remember that
I
skit.
do. Yeah, I do. I definitely do. It was like, what was the title? It was like something. I don't know, but he was like, it was just unnecessary. It's like,
Yes.
if they're gonna do that joke, you can do jokes in a way where they don't have to be wearing that inappropriate clothing.
Yes.
You
Like
know?
they make jokes all the time in shows like SpongeBob where
Yeah.
none of the kids are going to know it. Only really the adults will, but they're also not showing anything on screen that seems concerning. So when
Mhm.
you hear a one-off joke in SpongeBob that sounds like it could be inappropriate, you're like, huh, like I get it, and then you move on. But in something like this, where he's a little like fetus,
Mhm. Yeah.
and he's making jokes like that, or like you see those scenes, and they showed it in the documentary where Ariana Grande, like her character Kat, was like eating her own foot. She
Yeah.
had her whole foot in her mouth.
Yeah.
But there,
Like
you could
just straight
there's
up, like just
mhm.
like they would say like, oh, I remember when they talked to like the camera guy, and he was like, yeah, there was like a lot of unnecessary zooms on the feet area, a lot
Yeah,
of just like uncomfortable things that just lingered a little too long, and it was just like I just don't. The thing that didn't sit well with me is I guess that these people were just I don't know. Like a lot of people online were talking about how are these adults so complacent with all of
yes,
this. You
and
know, like just like I would not sit there and just film this, or just
no.
like like it must have been like they have like a hefty paycheck, or like they were too afraid to stand up to Dan, whatever it
Oh
was.
yeah, well,
They
because you
nobody
think
had these kids in
yeah,
mind, and nobody
and
had these
like
kids in a priority. Their safety,
and then
none
when
of it.
you look back at Brian's mom, because Brian's the one that was dressed in a leotard as well, that was
Yeah,
obviously skin tone, so he's supposed to be naked.
hmm
And they
yeah,
made a comment that, oh, they need a leotard that's like charcoal color.
yeah.
And then obviously, I think his
It's
mom
like,
did, and I think his mom did try and say, like, hey, this isn't right.
hmm
But then she got
hmm
backlash, which makes him
yep,
get the backlash. And
right.
then for a lot of these people, like, their kids are making the money.
Yeah.
and their kids
Yeah.
are letting everybody in their family live a decent life, which most of them didn't. And even I think it was Brian, the one that was like, I was making all this money, like I had goals to get, like we lived in the hood.
Yeah. And
And
he
this
wanted
was
to get
like
his
my
family out of
chance.
there.
Yeah, and this was my chance to do that. So I think
Hmm.
in his mom's defense, like as much as she wanted to speak up, she couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the common theme here is when the adults aren't complacent. Like it's they're in the one side or the other, they're either complacent and they let things happen, or when they speak up, they're ostracized,
Yes.
which happens to Brian's mom and then later on Drake Bell's dad.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I'm
because
sure
he
there's a lot of
advocated for
other
him
parents. Yeah.
long before, because he was originally his manager. He would be
Oh,
taking him
yeah.
to auditions. And then
Mhm.
that all we'll get into that in a little bit. The last thing that I want to say about the all that cast, actually I have a couple things. We'll go probably back and forth, but speaking of the inappropriate costumes, how did that skit get aired where the kid was a superhero and he had the costume where it literally looked like he had like a
Oh,
penis and
yes.
testicles on his shoulders. Like
I mm,
I that was the first time that my jaw dropped and I went,
yes.
"Oh my god." And
And
then the blatant cum shot joke.
I
I was
don't
like, "What?"
remember. Yes, and I don't remember a lot of the early skits and stuff because I was too
Yeah,
young. But
yeah,
like the time frame of like Zoe 101 and Victorious, like that era, I do remember a lot. So when the Zoe
mhm,
101 skit aired and when they were talking
mhm,
about it in the documentary, I was like,
yep,
I never thought about that as a kid. And you're not
no,
supposed to.
right,
But
because your
like,
mind doesn't go to that when
no.
you're a child. You just think like, "Oh, they're being silly, haha, it's like silly string,
Yes.
haha," you know, like.
And it was just
But
like,
then later
oh,
on,
it's like
you
slime.
realize,
And then
yep,
when someone in the cast is like, no, this is what it is. And all the kids are
yep,
like, I don't know what that is. And then
right,
they either have to ask their parent and
yeah,
then, mm, or you have to
yeah.
Google it, which wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, and I think some of the boys on the set of Zoe 101 were a little bit older, like
Yeah.
Kyle Massey's brother and the
Oh,
kid that played Chase.
yep.
So I remember the one girl, Alexa, who played Nicole in Zoe 101. She was like, "We were all looking behind the camera," and then the boys go, "Oh, it's a cum shot joke."
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
because a lot of the boys were probably older. Like the girls in that show tended to look younger. I don't know if they were
Yeah.
just looking younger, but the boys were probably like, "Oh, it's a cum shot joke," and the girls were like, "What?" Like they didn't
And
understand.
yeah,
You know
and
what I mean? So it's just like, oh
I
my
never
god,
knew what half of that was at their
grotesque.
age. Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Like I barely know my own body enough to
Yeah,
know other people's bodies and what they can do. But
yeah.
it started off pretty bad, and then in the all that, or wasn't the Amanda show? The scene where it's like the coffee and the sugar.
That's all that. That's the newer all
Yes.
that. That
Yeah.
involves the kid Kyle who goes on later to tell the another part of the documentary that I literally could not, like, I had to pause it
Yes.
and just
Uh huh.
take it in. Was he was the one that told the story about Brian Peck having the pen pal relationship with serial killer John Wayne
Yes.
Gacy.
Uh huh.
Because like, but he was in that skit. I specifically remember the coffee and the sugar and coffee
Yes.
skit.
And they were
Because I
just
used to just think it was really silly, and I think I would just like get a kick out of that because they
because
were
it's
just
like,
like,
oh,
oh,
yeah. But
sugar and
then
coffee, like it was silly. But when you think about it, the implications of that were they were just like basically like if it wasn't just sexual references in the show, it was just like unnecessary, like all that especially. I don't know why they had all of these like basically like torture,
yes.
like just torture things, like the
And it's
he was saying that
tax.
like basically
Yeah.
you're just like eating like all this sugar and it's like caking in your mouth and it's basically when you would do like the cinnamon challenge. It's got to
Yes.
feel like similar to that,
Yeah, and
you know?
Giovanni, she was in that skit
Mhm.
with Kyle, and they were just talking about it, how taxing like how taxing it was to do that skit because you're running back and forth constantly. And
Yeah.
then you're
Yeah.
also have to think, I'm not only running around an entire set for how many takes, I
Yeah.
have to now have a mouthful of sugar 3 or 4 times in each take.
Yeah.
and they showed the
And there's no
clip.
way you can fake that. There's no way you can fake that.
No, and they showed the
So
clip of it again, and I was like, how is this even allowed to be filmed?
yeah, because like given the everything else that was going on, there's no way that that wasn't like regular. That was like not coffee. If it wasn't
Yes.
coffee, then it was soda, which is also like a
Yeah,
sugary
either
drink.
way, you're taking
Like
caffeine with sugar, like
yeah,
triple the amount of sugar that's already in whatever it is you're drinking. Like it's just
hmm
insane how they got away with a lot of stuff.
yeah. And I specifically remember that, and I don't know. Again, I was just like an innocent kid, so I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, haha, they're just being like wild. But it's just like, it's just weird because like then that implies like, I remember the one kid Brian, or a couple other kids on the show saying like, there's like no like there was like no like child labor laws were being like broken all the time, so they
Yes.
were just constantly like, working over hours. And then it was like, yeah, because and they're filming skits where they're giving them like sugar, 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 so they can just go, 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 go. And it's just like
Yeah. I
I
just it's
don't know
ins
how I don't know how these sets were not raided by police and people arrested like way
I guess
sooner.
like no one either no one cared or
Yeah.
they I think well, I do think they cared, but I think a lot of the
hmm
staff that worked there, and you'll see it when you look at the female writers in the show, like they cared enough, but you can't go against your boss like that. At
Yeah.
least in that time frame, like Dan Schneider could make or break you. So this
Yeah.
isn't right, but like I can't say it's not right because then you're gonna make it so I can never work in Hollywood again.
Yeah. I'm gonna coin him as the dictator of Nickelodeon. I
Yeah,
said this earlier to myself, and it just makes perfect sense. And yeah.
and it's
Even
crazy
in
to
all that, he's only at the beginning of his fame, and that his power in the company just grows and grows
yeah,
and
and
grows, and
that
it
yeah
becomes
that was
gross and
in
gross and gross.
hmm and although like well yeah I just it's
Yeah,
I can't
I'm trying
I'm
to
like
think
trying to
of
process everything because it's like he made Disney or Nick.
yeah,
He made it what it
yeah,
was. And so when you
yeah,
look back at all the shows he made, and then you look back at interviews and stuff, and you're like, wow, this is like a great guy who really loves what he's doing. And then you
so
actually,
we thought,
yeah, and then you go behind the scenes and you're like, oh,
yeah, the one quote from the journalist, the whole thing of the tortured genius, like, oh, this guy's like a tough boss, so it must mean that he's good at his job,
yes. Oh, when
which
she
is
said that, I was like,
ridiculous. Yeah, yeah,
and I think he
yeah.
just wanted to prove to everyone, like, he grew up as the fat kid and all that stuff. And he just
Oh yeah,
wanted,
they constantly talked about how it was like the who is the one? I think later on they show her talking, but they never show her face. I think she's like a costume
yep.
person,
Hmm.
and then they were like, "Oh, he's literally giving off like um the guy who the girls never liked him, and he's just trying
Hmm.
to prove himself, like the insecurity of it all, you know."
And
Oh,
so
what was there anything
he
else to mention about all
yeah,
of that?
and then
Oh
so
yeah,
he took everything that I guess was negative in his life and was like, I'm gonna make this positive thing. And maybe in the beginning he didn't plan on getting the way he did, but I think after all that and the Amanda show, and then you're getting all this fame and success, and then it just went to his head. And he's
yeah,
like, I got, and he even said it himself, like, always trying to outdo the last thing that I did. And so
yeah,
I guess in his mind, he has to be tougher each time now that
yeah,
it is the way it is.
yeah. But I mean, like, I just feel like from the beginning, if you're working with kids, you have to have like there's just like there was I feel like there was ill will, and just money and power was the priority. Like I don't think I mean I don't know. Like you said, you give people benefit of the doubt, but this just does not seem someone who cares about the safety of children,
No.
and that just becomes evident
As
even more
time,
as
yeah.
the grotesque acts
Yes.
and discrimination and just allowance of like, I mean, like, not even just like, not even the kids, like he was just constantly like, what was the whole thing where they were like, he was constantly like making random women that worked on the set like give him massages.
Yes.
Like it's like, are you for real?
Mhm.
Really?
And they showed pictures of it.
Yep. Yep.
And then
And they were like,
obviously the
they
way
would live in
he
fear. Like they would be like, oh, who's he gonna pick this week? Who's he gonna
yes,
prey
and
on
then
this week?
obviously the whole thing with the female writers of the Amanda
Hmm.
Show where
Yeah.
they got they had to split one salary.
Which
Which how did
I
that even maybe no one checks enough. I don't know
yeah.
how salaries work. I'm not in charge, but like how did Nickelodeon get away with paying two people one salary?
Well, my whole guess is they'll even showed like the difference between like before the Me Too movement happened versus like now.
Oh
Like when
yeah.
we're like not post Me Too movement, it's still going on, but like once that came about, like there was a lot of reconsideration of like how women are treated in the workplace in Hollywood. So I'm guessing
Yeah.
like all these things like the lack of the internet, like not being able to spread information as readily as you can now on the
Yeah.
internet, and more like less laws about like equal pay. Like obviously
Mhm.
that's not fixed now, but I would say that it's probably improved from when they initially got hired to
Yep.
work at Nickelodeon. You
And the
know, especially with the
one
entertainment industry.
and then I forget both of their names, but the one female writer said that she was a tempest, and so like for her, this was still better. Getting paid half of a like splitting a salary with someone was still better than what she was doing, even though it wasn't that
Hmm.
great. So it's like, well, I might as well just do that. And so she's
Yeah.
splitting a salary with somebody else.
Hmm.
And then just the way they got treated the entire time they worked there
Yeah.
was just insane.
By the way,
'Cause-
their names are Chrissy Stratton and Jenny Kilgan. I just
yes,
googled
yep,
them. Yeah. So they're like initially like coming on to a like they just want to be comedy writers. Like that's just like
yes,
what they were aspiring to be. So that's when they were like, oh, I get a chance to work for a comedy show. Like they took that
yes.
and ran to it.
And
But
then remember who was the one with the longer hair?
I don't know which one was which. Let me just Google their names so that I'm not.
Yeah, I don't want to get it wrong.
No, no. I mean, all of our two viewers would. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
our two
For
viewers might like complain now.
so Chrissy Stratton was the one with the short hair, who was like instructed. Remember how he asked her to like lean over the desk and act
Yes,
like, yeah. So she was the one with the short hair, and then the one with the gray hair. That was Chrissy was the one that was like a little bit like thinner, and then I believe the Miss Gilkin was the
yes.
one with the longer hair.
And she was the one that was saying she saw a forum online to pitch your ideas and stuff. And then
Mhm.
so she pitched all of her ideas and said, "Hey Dan, can you take a look at this?" And then he gave it to his like assistant writer, and he told his writer like just pick your top 5. And then he said to her like, "I'm surprised you were the first one on the list
Which is a red flag to
to
begin with.
begin with." But then I guess in
Like,
some ways it's kind of like, or at least back then it's like, "Oh wow, like I know you're
kudos
surprised,
to you.
like
Like,
kudos to you," and like,
but it's
"Oh,
like
I'm first on the list."
backhanded
Like,
compliment. It's like
wow.
a backhanded compliment, in
Yes.
my opinion.
Yeah.
It's basically like, "Oh, I wouldn't have hired you, but everybody else liked it." You
So,
know?
like, you're hired and you're like, "Wow, like, so many people liked me," and you're not
But then
realizing, like, the
but
first half of
then
what he
like
just said.
right, exactly, like the blatant
Yeah.
disrespect.
So, he's
Yeah,
basically
I
saying, like, "Oh, this other guy picked you as first, but you're a woman, so I probably would have rated you probably not even on the list at all,"
mhm,
is what he was
mhm,
basically saying. And then he hired
yep.
both of them, and they had to split the same salary, and then he was talking to her, and didn't he say that if I find out you're going behind my back about
Yeah,
having the
because
pay
I think
being
it
split?
eventually happened where, that was when that couldn't happen anymore, like, they
Yeah,
couldn't split their salary anymore, and then, I believe it was, like, a network, like, higher up than him,
yeah,
like took over and was like, "You can't split the salary anymore." And then it wasn't even them that brought it up. I think it was just the higher up that found out what was going on.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
Dan called the one of them and said, "Oh, if I find out it was you, you're never going to work in this industry again."
Yeah. And then
So
obviously, and that's when she was kind of like, I can't do this anymore.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so she
Not to
left.
mention that was after. Didn't the one woman get, because the girl with the short hair got fired first?
Yes.
She got fired, and she
Yeah.
got fired for basically having a personal life, which is
Yes.
wild
She
to me.
got fired for taking like an extra day. So
Yeah.
she took like 3 days off or something, which I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure she got paid for, or she didn't get paid for. I don't know what the problem was, but she took like
But
three
it
days.
was basically just his control over
Yeah.
them, because he
And
wanted to just
then
control every aspect of their life.
the other girl, she didn't they hire a white man?
Yeah, and at full salary
Yes.
while they were. But this, I think that happened um before the one girl got fired. I think they hired like an additional male
Yes.
writer, and then they were like, compared to us two who have to split a salary, you're
Yes.
hiring
And not only
a white
that,
man with no credentials. It was his first job. He's
yes.
never done anything else, no previous experience, hired at full salary.
Yes. And we've been
So
here working this specific show for this many seasons, and we're still splitting a salary. And
yeah,
then they did the whole, you can't do that anymore. And then he got pissed off, and then he fired um, the first girl, and then the other girl quit. And you could tell like how upset she was with quitting because she loved the people and she loved the show, but obviously working under Dan was not.
yeah, but he seemed to be just a like a dark cloud over everything. Like
Yeah,
any the common theme with the abuse was that he was just anything that was good that happened, like otherwise, like from him, like if they just like working with other coworkers, or like
yeah,
writing for like the kids, or like just like how the show came about as a whole, like it was not worth what
yeah,
the toxic environment that he was creating.
yep,
Yeah, so the girl with short hair that got fired for basically having a personal life, she's Chrissy Stratton, and then Jenny Gilkin is the one that was
yes,
with the
hmm,
longer gray hair, who was threatened by him
yep,
when they were gonna give her an individual salary, basically.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
what is the next timeline after?
The next, also, before we move on from the writers, what about all the things about how he would treat like inappropriate workplace jokes as just like good fun
Yes,
and
and
pranks
oh
and
yes,
pranks,
and then
which
he
was
would
disgusting.
send a message to them and be like, "Oh, you have to say the word, you know, pumpkin out loud."
Right.
And
It would
then
start innocent and
yes,
start like just like a joke, like a prank. But
yeah,
then he would just always take it too far.
yes,
Like he would just say like, "Say your slut out loud." Like
yeah.
say it to
So it
everybody.
would always be like the little, oh, nonchalant, random pumpkin, and then it'd turn into like, call yourself an idiot, and then it would be like,
Mhm.
call yourself a slut, and then when you didn't call yourself a slut, he would, in all caps, keep messaging you until you say it out loud.
Yeah. So basically just doing this like weird bullying power dynamic
Yeah,
thing. So just a bully, abusive prick all around is basically
and
what it
then
comes down to.
it keeps going back, like, why would you want to stay in an environment like that? But that's all you have.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
these
because
people don't
it was
have
such a good
anywhere else
it
to
started out
go.
as exactly, because it started out as such a good opportunity for them, and they wanted to just like start their creative careers and just like do fulfilling work. But then in the end, it was just the toxic environment was not worth it.
Yes,
You know.
and it does
Which I
suck
don't even know if I
because
would have stayed on for, if I was in that position, I don't even know if I would have stayed on that long, because another thing that just made me gasp was when the girl, Christy said, she said he would make me like do inappropriate things, like lean over the desk and act like I
yes,
was like having sex, and it was like, or like being like, like like
the
this,
fact that
like
she
it was like
didn't,
say you were
yeah,
being sodomized from behind. I'm like, excuse me,
Uh-huh.
excuse me? I would have been like, oh my God. I was like, I don't, it's just
Uh,
insane that they had
yes.
to go through that.
Mhm. But
Insane.
then and why do you then stay in an environment like that? But then you have to keep thinking like for
Yeah,
some
but
people this is
that was
all
all
you
they had.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like you can't oftentimes at least now you can't quit a job without having something else lined up
Yeah. Yeah.
most of
And
the time because then you get stuck.
that was exactly. And that was probably evident even more back then
Yeah.
because back then, like now, so like people are normal and understand that men can be funny and women can be funny. But back then, the whole narrative was with adult women, like female comedians, that women aren't funny,
Yeah.
which is bullshit, obviously.
Yes.
But that was always the narrative until more and more female comedians were just showing, like, no,
I can
we
do
can be
this too.
funny. You're
Yeah.
just an idiot, like for not thinking
Mhm.
so. And that was another thing. Remember, he initially said that to them when he hired them. He
Yeah.
goes, "Oh, I personally don't think women are funny, but maybe you guys can like change my mind." I was like, "Huh?
Then why did
What?
you
Another?"
at that point don't hire them if you don't think women are funny. You should have just hired a man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at that point, it becomes evident that he just wanted he saw these two like vulnerable women that
Yep.
were willing to work for him, and he was like, "Ooh, let me see what I can get away with here."
And they had
You know?
nothing. So it's easy to
Yeah.
manipulate the people that don't have anything
Right.
to turn,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly, like, they don't have the power in the industry, they don't have the means to call somebody and be like, "Hey, this guy's doing this, that." They're just, like,
Yep.
scared, vulnerable and scared. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, obviously, gender discrimination and abuse of, female writers was very prominent in,
Yes.
the work on the Amanda Show. I guess we can go to the Amanda Show now because that's basically what they worked on.
Yep.
So, where do we wanna start with the Amanda Show?
Well, I feel like
Yeah.
obviously Katrina got basically fired. She's not the
Yeah,
it girl anymore.
phased out. Yep.
Yeah, they phased her out.
She
And
wasn't Dan's
then
favorite
they
anymore.
said that Dan Schneider was at some comedy club, saw Amanda Bynes there, and knew from the moment that he saw her that she was going to be the next big thing. And
Mhm,
so they put her, I think, maybe on all of that, like a few episodes, but
mhm,
then they
yeah,
just made a whole show
yeah.
for
Because I
her.
remember she used to have, she was, like, she was evidently younger than the rest of the cast because at that point, um, the original cast of all that was, like, basically going from, like,
Yes.
tweens to, like,
Yes.
teenagers, and
And
it was
she was,
evidently that they
yeah,
were, like, all, like, mostly at, like, I'd say, like, freshmen in high school age-ish.
probably, yeah,
Yeah,
at
but then
least
Amanda
in
comes in
their
and she's
mid teens.
yeah, exactly, and then but Amanda comes in and then she's, like, the young, like, new person in the group, and then when she starts out and all that, I believe she's, like, 9 or 10, like,
Yep.
no older than that. Because then when she starts the Amanda Show, that's a couple years later, and then she's at that, like,
Yes.
just becoming, like, a teen
But at least
age.
at that point, she was so famous from all that,
Yep.
and they loved her so much that it didn't
Mhm.
matter that she did what Katrina did and just grew up. But,
Yep,
like,
exactly.
why was it okay not okay for Katrina to now look her age? But when
Yeah,
Amanda does
because
it, it's like, "Oh, well, it's Amanda, it's fine."
yeah, well, Amanda was the commodity. Once Dan knew that she could make him money,
Oh, yeah.
she was just like, and it's evident, like, no matter what, there's no denying that she was probably one of the best, like, young, like, child comedians
Yeah.
that have ever been in the industry. Like, she just had, like, an instinct for just being
Yes.
funny. Like, she was always just, like, insanely talented. Like, she was just, like, she basically had, like, the skills of, like, somebody that had been to, like, had done, like, improv classes for, like, years, but she was
Yes.
like a child, and she just had, like, that natural just instinct to, like, be funny and, like, think on her feet.
Mhm.
Not the best choice of words for me, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, given Dan Schneider's, camera choices, but
Yes.
she just had, like, a sharpness to her that
Mhm.
they saw was very profitable, and, like, she just became, like, the face of Nickelodeon,
Yes.
basically,
And I
and one of the most evident, like, figures in our childhood, you know?
yes. And one thing about the Amanda Show, again, did not register in my brain until I saw it yesterday. But
Mhm.
they were talking about the Amanda show, and they were like, "Oh, she plays all these different characters."
Mhm.
One of the characters she plays was Penelope Taint. But like,
Yep.
I never, again, because I was a child, so you couldn't tell me, I couldn't tell you what a taint was. But
Right. Right.
now
But
when,
there's another obvious
hmm
inappropriate joke, like for a character that's regularly like she Penelope. I refuse. I'm not even gonna say the last name every time because it's unnecessary, and it was
yeah,
unnecessary to
so,
even give her a last name. I would think, but
yeah,
anyway, and the whole time I thought, and a lot of people I was seeing like on TikTok were saying this. I thought her name was Penelope Tate,
that's what
T
I
A
thought.
T
And
E.
I never
That's what
said
everybody
anything
thought.
different.
No, I said, "My name is Penelope Tate. I'm Amanda's number one
Yes,
fan, please." Like, she was,
I
a
could not
regular
have,
on the show because she
hmm
was Amanda's like, supposed to be this
stalker,
Amanda
yeah,
super fan,
yes,
like a stalker/super fan that would just follow her around and
yes.
try to meet her and become her friend, but
So
I always thought it was Tate.
you could have,
Always.
yeah. If you just told me years ago it was Taint, I would have been like, "What? Nope, no."
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and I
I
don't
guess
know if
that's
that's
the
just a
whole point
Mandela
is that
effect
when,
thing.
yeah, I guess that's the whole point of like when you're a kid, you don't know what that means. And the way they say it, it does kind
Mhm.
of sound like she's saying Tate anyway. So most kids are
Mhm.
probably not going to even look at it and think otherwise.
Yep.
Obviously, as a
Yep.
parent,
Yeah.
but
You hear otherwise because
yes,
you know of the vocabulary. And then that was another thing where I just my jaw dropped. I was like, "Oh, that's what it was? I didn't know that.
because the entire
I
time,
didn't realize that."
yeah, the entire time, I would assume it was just Tate. It just
Yeah,
sounds like it every time she spoke. I just that disturbed me a little too much
yeah,
because it's
yeah, and that was one of the more tame things in the documentary, but it's just one of those things of, like, she was in probably I think every single episode opened with something about Penelope. I think it
yes,
was always, like, her
either
trying to either, like, crash the set or, like, find Amanda or it
yes,
was
it's
all
either
she
the
opened
beginning
the
or the
show.
end. Like there's
Yeah, she
always
always had a clip. She
somewhere.
always had, like, a
Yeah,
segment. Mhm, mhm.
I just
Um, yeah. This
and
is
then
just so
obviously
much
the
to
Amanda
take
show
in.
is where you introduce Josh Peck, Drake Bell.
Mhm.
You have Raquel in there, and I think
Yes.
she mentioned getting fired.
Mhm. Yep.
She
Yep.
only
And then
lasted like a
before that, she
season.
mentioned the whole thing. Yeah, yeah, and I do remember her being on the show because she would always be, like, one of the girls that were, like, at the sleepovers or, like, Amanda's friend at
Yes,
school, or she was a regular, and
yep,
then she was just gone, and then I remember wondering why.
yes.
So,
And as a
yeah,
kid,
and
again, you don't really notice that there's a race thing involved because
yeah.
kids don't look at it that way.
No.
So now
No.
when you grow up and you're watching something like this and you realize like all those cast members that you just didn't see in the rest of the seasons, like where'd they go? And it's like, oh,
Mhm.
you just
Yeah.
fired them because they're black,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't get over I was very angry when they mentioned about how when she had her birthday party on
Yes.
set and they got her the big cake and then Dan had a problem with it. It's like, that's your
Like it's
star one of your stars of your show. What's the problem?
right.
What could be the problem other
But
than the
the
fact that she's
problem
black?
is she's
It's
not
evident.
Amanda Bynes.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
one, not the top one that's making you money.
Yeah.
She's black, and like Amanda
And you're a
probably,
racist
yeah,
piece of shit.
yep.
You know?
And you're gonna sit there and say you're not, but you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he it constantly they I love how when they would cut to, like, those random fade to blacks and they would have, like, quotes from Dan and he'd be like, "No, there was no evidence of that, like, this was not the intention." It's
Yes.
like, "Yeah, sure, sure. Of course you're
Okay.
making those
Sure,
statements to
Jan.
try to cover your own ass. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, Jan. Sure, Dan. Sure, Jan to the 10th degree.
Yes.
Get out of my
Some
face.
degree.
Please.
And then
Please,
of
please,
course,
please."
so then the Amanda show during that time is the first sexual predator.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forget his first name, but his last name is Handy, which is really
Jason.
Jason.
Jason's the first
But
name.
his last name
Yep.
is Handy, which makes it like 80 times worse.
Yeah, yeah, but
Um,
that you hope that that's the name he was given at birth, and he didn't take that name because it's like,
He married into a
if he
handy.
did, no,
No.
please.
He
But the Amanda show is when we get mentioned to the story of what is her name, the blonde
Oh,
girl,
Brandy.
Brandy.
I don't
Yep.
know her last name, but first name's Brandy.
I mean, we can call her Brandy. I mean, if you
Yes.
see the documentary, you know exactly who we're talking about.
Yes.
So Brandy starts corresponding through, which should have been. I'm sorry, not to judge people's parenting.
Oh,
Obviously,
yeah.
they are worried about their financial situation, but I'm sorry, but if my child is corresponding with an adult through email regularly, I'd be like,
Yes.
this is not necessary. You
No.
don't need to be doing this. Anything you need to be talking about, you should be talking to me, the
Yes.
parent. If you
And
have
I
questions,
guess
again, reach out to me,
yes.
like the parent.
Um and so I when they
I was
first
mad at her mom. I was
oh
mad
yeah.
at her mom.
And then her mom never spoke up about it until later on when he did get
Yeah,
arrested. And
yeah,
obviously it is hard to speak up about something like that as a
right.
child. I feel like
Mhm.
maybe as an adult it probably is too.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it were my kid, I I can't say like I want to say I would be the person to go to the police right away and just be
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this is, he was emailing my daughter and it seemed all right because he's like part of the, show she's working
Yeah,
on."
he's a production assistant on the show
S-
that she's working on.
Yeah, and so, I allowed them to communicate through email, which I was aware of, and I saw those emails.
Yeah.
But now this is what happened. But then
Yeah,
again,
well, just
yeah,
for context, they do they correspond back and forth through email, and then I believe Brandy receives an email, and then the mom sees her face kind of change, and she gets kind of like
yeah.
has a
So I have
like a
the quote.
negative
Yeah.
reaction. Yeah,
So obviously everything seemed innocent. And then on one occasion, Handy sent Brandy a nude photograph, and her mom said it was a picture of him naked masturbating. And she's
yeah,
11.
yeah. And didn't he say some grotesque thing about
Like, I
like
want
wasn't there
you. It
like
was,
something like I wanted you to know that I was thinking of you?
yes.
Or, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
What?
Handy said
Wait,
he had sent it to her because he wanted her to see that he was thinking of her. And then she claims she
I
never
just
reported the incident to authorities, but she took Brandy out of the industry, which I guess in her defense was that was her way of let moving on from it
mhm.
is not like I don't know. Like
Yeah, I
obviously I'm not going to
just
sit there and blame anyone's parents because I don't
no.
know. I say, "Oh, I would do this," but if it were actually in that situation, I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah,
But she took her
yeah.
away from the industry.
Mhm.
And
Which
then
at least
yes.
good, at
And
least.
then at the next like a few years later, a year later, I guess he got arrested because someone received like a tip about him. And then
Mhm.
wasn't it like a large number of pictures that they found on his like 1,000
Yeah,
something?
in his like apartment or where he was
Yes.
living, they found copious amounts of child porn, and
Yes.
then
It
they
was
also
like
found
over a
like
thousand
his
or something
yeah,
videos
yeah,
of kids doing things, obviously. Ugh.
yeah,
And let
lots
me
of it.
tell you,
And then
I
they also
was
found like letters. They had his diary, which detailed
oh
what he thought
yes.
about
Yes.
every
So he
girl
had
on set.
yes, so
Yeah.
he would have notes about it and then he would have like things that reminded him of each person. So like for
Mhm.
her it was letters that they had together. But then the
Yeah.
other 11-year-old, he had her underwear.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, and he also mentioned that didn't he write in his diary about another, young girl that he was actually, like, kissed, I believe?
Yes. And it says
Yeah.
Handy wrote sentences like, I'm a pedophile, full blown. I have really been giving to my desire for little girls these past few weeks. And I even struggle on a day to day basis of how I can find a victim to rape if I have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I tell you I wanted to throw up,
Mhm. Yeah, there was several
Oh
times
my
where it took me like these documentary these both of these it's four parts in total obviously, but shown in two parts on the ID
mhm.
network. When I tell you that I've never had to like I like watching documentaries. I watch them quite often, but I've
Yes.
never watched something that's affected me so much that I had to pause this
Yes.
multiple
Yep.
times to just sit with like I would have to like I would literally like just pause it and like go do something else. Like I would like just
Yes,
to
and
like
I just remember texting
regroup
you.
from what I just
Yes, and I would be
saw.
texting you the entire time like, "What the fuck is going on?"
My
And I
whole
would just
thing
have
is
this pause and be like, "I gotta go play with my cats." Like, I gotta
yeah,
like, I
yeah, I
can't
gotta do something.
I
I have
gotta
to
do
do something to take
something.
me out of this. It was like I I was like I don't know how this I'm glad at least that they aired it in two parts because I don't know if I could have watched
Oh,
this all
no. I
together.
woulda had
I
to pause
probably
and, like
mentally would have
yeah.
shut down
And
fully. Like
then, what really got me, didn't they say it was only, like, 6 years?
yeah. Yeah,
So
when
it
he
says
was
they took
fully
him
when he was
yeah.
arrested with, all of the possession of the child porn and the letters and the confessionals and everything that they found in his place of residence, I believe that's all the jail time that he received. He does also have to register as a sex offender, which will
Yeah.
gladly affect his future work. Like, I believe that makes it so that
Yes.
he can't work with children anymore
Mhm.
if you register as a sex offender, I believe. But my whole thing is like God, were there not laws and regulations about, like, background checks?
And
And,
maybe
like, and then, like, this
but
is, like
I
'cause
always wonder, like, maybe he didn't have anything prior to that that would've seemed like a red flag.
yeah,
So maybe,
or
like,
if he did,
although he
it was
was a
hidden enough.
yeah, so maybe he
Yeah,
was a pedophile this entire time, but no
mhm,
one knew about it. He wasn't convicted, he wasn't on any website, so there's no way to know it even if you did the background check
yeah, yeah,
until you find that out.
and again, you know what, it was, working in their favor with not getting, like, background checks is the lack of internet.
Mhm.
Because now, like, I had a job where, at one point I had to, work with children in a school, and the amount of background checks that you have to go through
Yep.
was extensive, and mostly everything was done online. So that's
Yes.
probably why, is that there was the lack of things that are done on the internet, because the internet was just like I mean, when these shows started out, it was late '90s, early 2000s, it was
So
just not the internet was just not what it is now.
yeah. I don't even know when the internet yeah, so Google was 1998. But you
Yeah,
have to think, like, these shows were already aired
yeah,
prior to that, and even if they aired around the same time, like, Google was not like, even though it was a big thing and there probably was videos on TV and advertisements, but, like, what family, what generation of people back then are gonna be like, "This is the next big thing we have to get on."
yeah,
Most people
yeah,
are
I
so
mean
stuck in their ways because it's what they're used to for the past 30 something years. So what
yeah,
companies are gonna randomly one day be like, "Oh, it's 1998. Google's now a thing. Let's use it."
mhm,
So
mhm,
it
yeah.
took a while probably for companies to start using things like Google. And
Yeah, and
even
the
then,
internet,
no
I
one
think, was
yeah,
probably it was more so first used for, like, entertainment, and then it took a lot for, like, because even though, like, we were using, like, the internet, we weren't using it for, like, workplace
yes.
related things. Like, how long would even when we were, like, AOL, like, dial up and everything, there was not that much like, we had to do, like, computer classes in school to learn, like, the basic, like,
How to
typing,
type
using
yeah.
Microsoft Word, and all of that. Like,
And we were
that wasn't a skill that people were putting on
no.
resumes yet.
And so, like, no one's gonna even think even if they did use it in the workplace, you're not gonna think like, "I need to somehow figure out if this guy is a sexual predator." Like,
Yeah, I
you
just
don't
don't I
really
guess there
yeah,
was just not maybe they had, like, just a bunch of people that were just dropping the ball that just did not have protections like this. I mean,
yes.
it's just insane
And
to
I
me how
know
these people
yeah,
just,
and
like,
then so
slipped through.
mhm,
Like
and Brandy's mom noted that, like, they weren't allowed on set when the
yeah,
filming was happening, so obviously they were there on the actual lot,
yeah,
but they
yeah,
probably
which
were in a whole separate room, and
right,
that
right.
she recalled him being very charismatic and charming, A lot of
Mhm.
other people really liked him. A lot of the other cast members. I think Giovanni
Yeah.
had like a
I mean,
book
there's
that was
pictures.
signed
Yeah,
by
yeah, she had, like, a
him.
yearbook type
Yeah.
situation, I remember.
Yep. And
Yep,
it's
and
just
then that was another thing that was, like, that was a red flag to me, though, the fact that they were so anti-parents on set.
mhm.
I don't think that should have been allowed at all. I
No.
feel like if you have a child that's, like, under legal age, I feel like the parents should have a say of when they wanna be
Especially
on
yeah,
set.
especially when you do
Like
have the child like labor laws in place.
right.
Your child
Right,
can't
because
be on set.
if the
Yeah.
parents aren't on set, they have no way of knowing, "Oh, we're going 2 hours over what we should
Yeah.
be," because the parents are just told, "Oh, I we'll tell you," but they probably were like, "Oh, we'll tell you when to pick them up, or we'll tell you when to come back,"
Oh, yeah, or we'll come in
you
the
know?
room when we're done, and so they would
Right,
just be in a separate room for 13, 14 hours, and I think it was maybe the female writers were saying, like, you couldn't even get your lunch break, you couldn't even go to the bathroom.
yeah. Hostile, just
Yeah,
hostile, like I said, Dan Schneider, dictator of Nickelodeon,
yep,
basically.
but when you look at it from the outside, he seems like this all-American great guy, he loves working with kids. How
Yeah,
many shows
they
did he
called him the
make?
Golden Boy. He
Yes.
referred to that a couple times in the
Mhm.
documentary. Golden Boy of Nickelodeon. They show the whole clip of, like, at the Kids' Choice Awards, he's, like, receiving this, like,
Oh, the
award.
legacy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, whatever the what like, 'cause the Kids' Choice Awards are basically, like, kids, like,
The
version of the
Oscars,
Oscars.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so then he was getting the Kids' Choice like, their award show's equivalent of, like, a Lifetime Achievement Award
Yep,
because of what he had done
yep.
and all the shows he created and all, like, the careers that he launched, and lo and behold, there's all this grotesque, evil shit
Mhm.
going on, and we were just like
And
it was all
imagine, like,
swept under the rug.
when you have to like, all the people that were there presenting that award to him. Drake, Josh, Carly, I think, was there, Victoria
Mhm.
Justice, like,
Yeah.
so many people were there to support him in getting this legacy award.
Yeah.
Like, how many of those people at the same time were like, "This is not right," but, like, no one knows this is going on
Mhm.
until
Yep.
way later.
Yeah. And how many of them don't even process what's going on until they're older,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
And then
Oh, man.
more on Jason Handy. It says in 2004 he pleaded no contest to lewd acts on a child, disturbing explicit material by email, and sexual child exploitation. These charges stemmed from his actions against underage girls who appeared on Nick, The Amanda Show, and Cousin Skeeter. He assaulted
Yeah.
his second victim, who was from Cousin Skeeter, at her home in
Mhm.
2000, and he later
Yeah.
told the girl not to tell her mother and assured her that he could get her jobs in other shows. And he
Did
only
they mention who it was on Cousin Skeeter? Because I
no.
watched that show a bit. Yeah,
I
see,
wonder who it
they
was.
chose to keep
They
her.
didn't say.
Yeah. I mean, they did say it was a female, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
because he seemed
Okay.
more aligned with the girls,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
oh my god. And then it says at the time he received 6-year prison sentence. After his release in 2009, he moved to North Carolina and registered as a sex offender. And then about a decade later in 2014, authorities in North Carolina arrested him and they took him into custody on 3 counts of innocent liberties with a child and 2 counts of sex offender registry violations.
Yep.
So a
So there
decade
it is.
later, he did more things.
Just right back where we started.
Yeah.
And
And a lot of people were not aware of Jason
no,
because
I
he's
had no idea
no.
about him
And
until I watched this documentary.
yes.
So,
And looking back, like you're a kid, he was always there for you. He was there every day. He made jokes. He seemed like just an all around decent guy to be around. None of the
mhm.
parents had any weird feelings about him.
No, no.
You would have never,
They had nothing
yeah.
bad to say about him.
And this is the type of guy that, like, when you saw that it was him, you were shocked.
Mhm. A wolf in sheep's clothing, I think, would
Yeah,
be the
yeah.
appropriate
And
thing to
then
say about him
Giovanni
from
said,
most of these men in power at
yeah,
Nickelodeon.
and so Giovanni said, we're working 12 to 13-hour days. And when you're on there for seasons, you grow comfortable and you let your guard down. And again, you're also a child or a teenager where you're looking to an adult like this is acceptable behavior. So you're not
Mhm.
really noticing these things
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
fact you've been around them for so long that that's your normal. And
Yeah.
then so they would go to his house constantly, right?
Yeah, yeah, because that was also
For
the common
yes.
theme. Obviously, this in retrospect looks like an opportunity to just get children alone. So they would just have these like parties and they would
Mhm.
like make the kids feel comfortable. Just another way to earn their trust.
Yes.
Typical abuser
And
behavior,
then
you
Kyle
know?
was at one of these parties
Yes, yes,
and was
this was
like,
going into the
yes,
Brian this is going into Brian Peck. So
Brian,
this
yes,
is the he was also another PA. Oh no, he was a dialect coach.
dialect,
Or
yep,
like he would yeah, a dialect coach and like an acting coach, I want to say at
mhm,
some point. Well,
yep,
at least to Drake Bell, he becomes an acting coach.
yes,
And then he was the whole thing. I remember this bit that he had. He was on All That, and I think Drake and Josh, it was All That. He was called Pickle Boy, and he would
yes,
walk around and he wouldn't
mhm,
talk. It was a bit that he did, and I specifically remember this because I thought it was like bizarre, but it was like funny. I was like, oh, there's Pickle Boy. Like he would just walk around set and just like the set of the manager. Like remember how they would have those like bits where you were kind of like getting like a look at the behind the scenes. Like
yes,
it would make it look like a Hollywood production. Like they'd be like, oh, we're getting the set and we're getting ready to start the show. You know what I
yes,
mean? And then he would be walking around and he would just have like a plate of like this like steel plate of just like pickles,
yes,
and that was just like his bit. And I was just
mhm,
like, oh, that's a little weird,
yeah, and then they
but I
showed a
didn't really
clip of
think
it,
anything of it as a
yes,
kid.
and they showed a clip of
So
it with, Ray Romano,
when he was a
and
guest star, because the Amanda Show would get readily some very
oh,
like
yeah,
popular guest stars, like very
mhm,
like prominent people in entertainment. And what you were gonna say
oh,
about
yeah,
Ray
so
Romano?
they showed the clip, and I've seen it when I a kid, and again, you're
Yeah,
a kid, so you're not thinking, but they showed a clip where Ray Romano was stuck in the bathroom, and
yeah,
he needed help
yeah,
getting out, and it just
yeah,
so happened that Brian Peck as Pickle Boy was walking on by, and the handle to the bathroom, there was no handle, there was just a hole where the handle would be. First off,
yeah.
the door would be unlocked at that point. There's no handle,
Right,
just walk out. But the handle was missing. There
right. Because then he
was
could just put his hand through and
perfectly
like it would
yes.
be yeah,
There was a perfectly round hole where the handle would be.
yeah,
And then Brian Peck comes over with a bunch of pickles and just sticks the pickle through the hole and hands it to Ray Romano. And then
yeah.
Ray Romano's like, "Oh, a pickle! I love pickles." And then he just bites into it, and then you're like, "Oh, that's
Yeah,
funny!" Like, haha.
yeah, because that was the whole bit. He was supposed to be the guest star on the show, and he was stuck,
Yes,
quote unquote, in the bathroom. And then he was like, "Oh, well, I'm kind of hungry." He's like, "Is
yes,
there any food out there? Like, I'm getting kind of hungry." And then they just did the pickle bit, which essentially is a glory hole joke.
yes. Which
So
again,
again,
as a child, it's funny because it's like, "Oh, I'm hungry. Look, there's the perfect hole, and now he has a
like it's
pickle
just
and
like
he's hungry."
it's yeah, it's masked as this like
Yes,
everything in Nickelodeon was masked as like this quirky humor,
yeah.
but it was just innuendos.
And it's
That's all
one
it was.
thing to like make a slight joke that
Yeah,
like is gonna go over most people's heads and even
yeah,
adults' heads unless you're watching it again. Like again, SpongeBob did a lot of those jokes, but they're not actively acting out anything like that.
yeah,
To
yeah.
where
And
it's
there are
like
all
this is
other
a
like
huge problem.
there are other live action shows on Nickelodeon that would make these like
Yes.
innuendos that were like not like just like little nods like for the parents like make parents laugh if they were watching with their kids,
Yes.
but like I know Ned's Declassified would have things like that, but
Yeah.
the Dan Schneider productions were on
Mhm.
some different shit,
Oh
you know?
yes.
Yeah.
And then Kyle was
Kyle
talking
Sullivan from All That.
yes,
Yep.
was going on and on about the parties that would be happening at Brian's house
Yeah.
and how he would invite everybody over. And so when, he walked into Brian's house, he thought it was kind of odd the way it was like laid out, but at the same time, like they were both kind of quirky and weird. So it
Mhm.
kind of both matched their vibes. And then he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, we went into like this extra room, like the
Yeah.
garage," I think he said. And
Yeah.
then I saw this picture of a clown and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then he
Yeah.
said that Brian
And
came over and was like, "Oh, look at this." And he flipped the picture over, or the painting
mhm.
over, and it was signed by John Wayne Gacy.
Notorious serial killer, John Wayne Gacy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Not just a serial killer. It was young boys and men, like young
Yeah. Yeah.
teens and
Exactly.
even younger. And he would
Yes.
lure them into the house and mhm.
And it was a self-portrait, the picture, because he
Yes.
was notorious for, dressing up as a clown
Yep.
when he was doing these things.
And then he
So,
also said, not only
there's
does he
that.
have the signed picture, it was like from your friend, John
Yeah.
Wayne Gacy, and turns out they were pen pals.
Yeah. And then he was so excited to show them. He have, I remember him mentioning, like, a pile of letters that he also
Yes.
had. And so that was, like,
Yes.
the thing about that that blew my mind is, like, he said this is immediately, like, he's like, "I was 14 at the time." He's like, "So he's like, "I knew who John Wayne Gacy was, kind of." He goes, "But you don't really know." He's like, "You're a kid, so you don't really fully know the
The details.
details."
Yep.
Yeah, but he said, the thing that I don't understand, again, how things were not like, there's so much complacency happening with these adults, because at that point when he saw it, he brought other people into the room
Hmm.
to show them. Like, his instinct even kicked in as, like, a 14-year-old to be like, "Oh, I think people should see this." So he, like,
Yes.
brought people in to see it.
And they were all kind of like,
Nobody
this is weird.
nobody yeah, but, like, that didn't ring any bells in any adult's head to be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, maybe this isn't a guy that should be around children."
Yes. Like if
I
you're,
just
it's not, and it's not like it. It's not like he knew John Wayne Gacy growing up, and it was like this was your childhood friend that turned out to
yeah,
be a serial killer, and you're like still have some sort of connection because you were once friends. Like
yeah,
this is just a random serial killer that you're pen pals with.
yeah, and it was the thing that got it about me was it wasn't like Brian wasn't speaking about it in a way where it seemed like he was condemning anything. It's
Yeah.
remember the thing that creep like makes like chills go down my spine was when he was like, "And Brian was very excited to show me this."
Yeah.
What? Like, that's just
Mhm.
insane, deranged.
Yes.
Like,
And no one thought that was just a little weird.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just,
It's
I
just
just,
yeah.
I'm so upset that these people are allowed to be
Yes.
around children.
And that
And then this man, speaking of, Giovanni Samuels, I wonder if she ever ran into Brian at Disney, because then later on, we find out that Brian actually does go to work for Disney later on,
yes, and she was on
and
the
he
show
does
that he was on because
right, he was on
after
the show
he
that
got
has Zack and Cody,
arrested and did all that,
which we'll get into in
somehow
a little bit.
somehow he ended up working on Disney, which
Yeah,
at that point, you already know his history. You already
right.
know what happened. Even if you didn't know it was Drake Bell at that time, because I don't think he mentioned it, you know he got arrested. You know it had something to do with children. Why would you hire him for a Disney show that's also involving children?
Yeah, it just goes to show again that they, well, that when they go on to, um, put the spotlight on Drake Bell's, case and what he goes through, it just shows how much victim blaming went on.
Yep.
Because it's like they think this is just some kid who's, like, mad at this producer and, like,
Yes.
trying to make things up about him.
Oh, and
Which,
there's
how dare you? How
and
dare you
there
ever
you should
think that when a child
see
comes to you with that information?
you should see some of the comments on
What
things
the, on what?
with just this in general and the letters. Obviously, there's letters that came out when Drake was testifying, and I never
Mhm.
knew this was a thing, but I guess people can write letters to defend the person, and
Yeah,
so
this
there's a
might be
lot of
more evident if it's someone who's in the entertainment industry or
yes,
famous, because I don't think if this is just somebody, some random person, unless they have a lot of personal friends
Yeah.
or like just people. Like I think this is probably more evident in things where it's like a person that's
Yeah.
in the entertainment
But
industry or
there was
famous.
a lot of people, and we'll get into this more, but there's a lot of celebrities that were defending him and put a letter out there to the judge. And I'll tell you later, the comments that I've seen are horrendous.
Yeah,
You'd be
yeah,
surprised at like who's supporting the bad guy.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
insane. And so
yeah,
obviously it's kind of weird. You kind of had the sense of like Brian's not really the best guy, but
yeah.
like he hasn't done anything. So like it's all
In
right.
their
Like
eyes,
in their
in their
eyes.
experiences.
And so far he's just a little weird. And so like
Yeah.
Drake's dad always kind of had that sense like something it's a
Mhm.
little weird. He's spending too
Yeah,
much
something's off.
time, yeah. He's spending a little too much time with my son.
Yeah, I
But
remember
like
when they start his like testimony and he starts saying like, yeah, we'd be on set and he would like get like involved with the
yes.
costuming and then he'd be like, no, Drake can put that on himself. Like, what are you
Yes.
doing?
And he would just be in
He's
the
like a
dressing
teenager.
room
Yeah.
and
He'd
it
just be
just
around, like
yes.
touching him, touching his arm. Which do you remember that one clip? Which I just wonder if this is ever gonna become a thing or like ever like get more information about this. Did you see the clip of him in with Leonardo DiCaprio
Yes.
as a child?
Mhm.
I was like, oh boy.
Yep.
It just makes you think, you know?
Yes. And
Like what
again, back then he works, he's been in this industry for a long time. He works
Mhm.
with kids constantly. So
Mhm.
in their eyes, it's like, oh, this is just a guy who's a little too friendly. But like, again, he's only touching their shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, as far
Yeah.
as anyone's aware, nothing else had happened up
Yeah.
until all the Drake stuff.
Mhm.
And then so
And I remember one of the things that they say is, they go, "Well," and this is so disrespectful to, gay people in general to say this. It's like, "Well, he's gay, so
oh,
that's
yes.
why.
So
So that's why
Drake's
he's just like a
dad,
touchy-feely
yeah,
guy."
Drake's dad,
Like
I think, tried to speak up about it to some of the other
mhm.
producers or people, and they were just like, "Oh, I mean, I haven't seen anything, but he's a little too like weird sometimes."
Yeah,
And they were like, "Oh, well,
yeah,
he's gay." But wouldn't that?
right.
But then wouldn't that?
But it doesn't matter. It's called being inappropriate. I don't
Right?
care.
But
We saw both parts of it. We saw the Jason individual being inappropriate with little girls, and then we see Brian Peck being inappropriate
yes,
with little boys.
and you can't.
Sexuality doesn't matter in that situation.
Right? But even if you did,
It's called being inappropriate.
right? But even if you did want to say sexuality mattered, you're saying that to someone who's going after a male. You're saying, "Oh, he's gay," so that you could like, "Oh, he's gay. He's not going to touch women because he doesn't like women. He's not touching women. He's going after
Right.
Drake." So you can't even attempt to say, "Oh, it's he's gay, so he wouldn't do that to guys
Yeah.
because he's
Yeah. But I
gay."
mean,
So
they were using that.
yeah,
Well, I feel like they were using that as like not an excuse, but like kind of just like, oh, well, that's why he's gonna be like
yeah,
affectionate and like touchy feely, like the whole stereotype
mm-hmm.
of like that's well, he's just like a sensitive, like touchy feely
Yeah,
type of
he's
guy. He's
sensitive.
gay, so that's like
He's so
he's just being
sensitive.
friendly,
Yes.
right? Like that has nothing to do
Yeah.
with it. Nothing to do with
And
it.
I felt so bad for Drake's dad because you can tell again, same thing with some of the other moms of the kids from like all that where you can see things aren't going the way they should. You want to speak up, but then you speak up and that's when things go south. So he tried to speak up and
Hmm.
that's when everyone was like, "Oh, he's gay, blah blah blah." And kind of like, "Okay, all
Yeah,
right, I
but
guess."
you can just see that.
Oh,
There,
yeah.
so let's just this is when the documentary kind of pivots. They do the whole story, like they said Kyle's story about John Wayne Gacy, and then
Mhm.
they kind of pivoted to when the end of the second episode when they mentioned like, oh well, this was Brian Peck getting arrested, and this was involving a child actor on one of our shows. And then you have that one guy that actually left early before, I think he left before this even happened, the guy named Virgil, I believe,
Yes.
with
And
the, I believe he has like a bald
mhm.
head, and he goes, "Well, it wasn't anybody on one of our shows." So you saw this all through like the
Yes,
promos
yes.
and everything. And then he was like, "Yeah, it was involved." The person interviewing him goes, "Well, it was involving a child actor." And then he sits there, and his face kind of drops.
And he
And
was
he goes,
like on one of
"On
our
one of our
shows and
shows."
they're like, "Yeah." And he's
Yeah,
like, "Honestly, no idea." And you can
and
tell
then
like he was being honest about it because
yeah,
even he said, I was going through like a terrible divorce. My
yeah,
marriage was like crumbling and not once did Dan, my closest friend, not once did he ask me if I'm okay.
right, right,
And
right.
then
And then they had
yeah,
their falling out, and then he leaves the
left.
network, and then when again they show that thing of him kind of like being told that this is one of the
Yeah.
children on one of their shows, and then lo and behold walks in Drake.
Yes.
And then the next episode, which is the third episode, I believe, is the spotlight on him.
Yes.
So
And
I don't know if you we want to start like a little bit on that.
this is by far like the I mean, the first two episodes were hard enough to watch,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
felt so bad. And again,
yeah.
you're not discrediting what Drake did.
No,
Like
not at all.
he's an awful person for what he did, but then
Yeah,
you have to look back and see, well, he was abused himself.
right.
It's like people
It's the
that
classic. It's the cycle of abuse
yes.
just continuing,
So it's like when you
unfortunately.
live in a household with people that are always smoking and doing drugs, you have a higher chance of also growing up being a victim of drugs and alcohol. It's the same
Yeah,
kind of thing. Like you're
yeah.
abused so much as a child that this is all you know. Doesn't
Yeah.
make it right, but
No,
this is all you know. And so
not
like
at all.
so he starts off talking about how like Brian used to say all the time, like, oh, your dad's just he's a bad manager. He's
Mhm.
not really looking out for you.
Right.
And it
Right.
got so bad to the point where he had to split from his dad because
Yeah,
he
which
believed what
literally
Brian
that
said.
that 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 broke my heart. I
Yes.
was crying. I was
Because you can
like
tell,
very I
like,
was tearing up.
because his dad was talking about it too. And he was crying. And he was like, I just want to
Mhm.
do what my son wants. So, like, if
Yeah.
this is what he wants, like, I'm going to do it. But this is breaking my heart this entire time. It's like
Yeah.
going through another divorce.
Yeah, yeah, because they had just been it was basically just them kind of on their own because they got divorced, I believe, when Drake was 5,
Hmm.
I believe, and then, like, Drake always says, like, the whole thing about, like, "Oh, always wanted to be in the movies, I was always watching old movies and doing
Yep.
these, like, comedy bits." He's like, "I just always wanted to, like, entertain, it was just kind of like my thing," and then his
Hmm.
dad was doing that routine of like he knew how much Drake wanted to do this, so he would just constantly be taking him to auditions and trying to look out
Yes.
for opportunities for him. And he was
He
his
was,
manager
yeah, he was a really good
initially.
dad. And he just
Yeah,
wanted what was best for his
from what we
son.
can see, you
Yeah.
know.
And then, so obviously, in that case where you don't have both parents, parental figures. So, like,
Mhm.
obviously, you have your dad, but then outside of your dad, when you're at work, like, you don't have anybody else. And so here's this guy that's nice to everybody. Oh, he takes you to Disney World or Disneyland all the time. And he
Mhm.
does all these things for you. Look how great he is. And he's telling me all these things about my dad. Like, maybe it is
Yeah.
true. And then you
Yeah.
start second guessing yourself because you're 13, 14 years old,
Mhm.
and this guy who wants to give you the world is saying, like, this person's bad for you. You do start to think like that.
Right.
And
Right.
so he, like, kind of basically broke up from his dad.
Mhm.
Being
Yeah.
14 and 15, you can't drive yet.
Mhm.
You don't
So he
have your
can't take
own
himself to
house. Yeah.
auditions. Can't
You
take
don't
himself to auditions.
mhm. You don't
So,
have a house. So
mhm.
then Brian was like, "Well, I'll take you everywhere."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
come live with me. His mom was like, I'm not driving out there every time you have an audition. Like, that's too
Yeah.
far. So clearly his mom's not in the picture much.
Mm-mm.
And then,
And
so,
clearly the mom's not putting. I mean, I don't know if she was just. I don't know if Brian just had a way of like just talking. I don't know, but I just this is other comments that I've been seeing. It's like, how is his mother not more involved
yes.
and aware? Like she just really like passed this kid off to this like
Yep.
random guy. Like I just
Yeah.
it's
And,
evident of the two
hmm
parents that his dad was more concerned about his safety,
yes. And
in my
again,
opinion.
I don't know who his mom is.
Right. We
Of
only see, I
course.
believe, like one picture of her. We have
Yep.
no testimonies from her, no interviews, nothing.
Yes.
So
And so, like, she's clearly not involved enough. His dad was, I guess, in Drake's eyes, overly involved to the point where it's like, all right, this is too much. But here's this guy that's basically doing everything my dad was doing, plus more stuff that my dad couldn't do for me. So, like, this is an amazing guy that's like willing to go out of their way, do all
yeah.
of these things.
Mhm.
And then,
Yeah.
like,
So he places a lot of trust in him.
yes,
As
he's
it,
letting
like
me not only stay at his place, he drives
mhm.
me to my auditions. He does so much for me. And then that's when, oh my God, I can't, like, oof.
Yeah, I mean,
It,
we don't have to like if
no,
you watch the documentary, you will
you'll
see
know. But
like I mean, Drake
basically,
himself cannot even say
yes. But
the
what
what
Drake
happened.
did say was he woke up one day to Brian abusing him
Yeah, yeah, it's a
sexually.
sexually assaulting him, and
Yep.
he didn't say, but you can see then when he goes on to say it, the he takes a few seconds, he takes a few breaths. You can see because this is again we got to realize that this is the first time he's talking about this publicly
Yep.
at all, at all.
And
So
even, yeah,
the
even the person that was interviewing him was like, you can say or not say any, like,
yeah, whatever you're
whatever you're
comfortable with.
okay with saying, say it. And if not,
Yeah,
like, you don't have to talk about anything. And he was like,
yeah,
this is the first time I've spoken publicly about this at all.
yeah.
Yep.
Outside of therapy is what he said,
Yep.
I believe. Yeah. So yeah, and then
So, yeah.
they go on to show the charges that eventually come up, and
Hmm.
then you eventually see all of the grotesque things that were
Yes.
involved. That I remember Drake saying, he said, "This is how I'm gonna put it." He goes, "Picture the worst things that can be done to a person in regards to sexual assault,"
Uh-huh.
and that's what happened.
And, but he was like,
And
in
then there's
times
just
that, yeah, he was basically like triple that.
yeah,
And then
and then there was a
also,
lot of silence for, and you just see how it just sits on
yes.
his face,
And
like just
then,
like just the
hmm
realization of what he's sharing
yeah. And then so Drake
with
was
us.
also mentioning that he eventually got a girlfriend and he would spend so much time at her house because obviously
Mhm.
he didn't want to spend time at Brian's house.
Yeah,
And so,
because it just kept happening.
yes. And so he was supposed to go with Brian to Disneyland the one day, but he didn't want to. So he stayed home and
Yep.
Brian kept calling
Or
him.
he's at the girlfriend's house, I
Yes.
believe.
And
Yeah,
Brian kept
and then
calling
Brian keeps
him,
calling.
didn't
Mhm.
answer. So then Brian called the girlfriend's house.
Yeah. Which is this is not when everybody had like if you had cell phones, it was just flip phones,
Yes.
basically. So the more common thing was to have like the cordless like house phones.
Yes.
So he goes on to call the girlfriend's, which beyond me how he even got that phone number.
He
Number
had,
one, I don't know.
I don't know if Drake gave it to him
Probably
or,
because he probably like maybe was like
yeah.
he had basically control over his entire life, so he probably
Yeah.
knew like where the girlfriend lived and probably had the number and all of
Yep.
that, so he could probably basically track him. I'm
Yes.
assuming.
And so he kept calling the girlfriend's number, and the girlfriend's mom was like, this is not normal. So she picked
No.
up, and then Drake was kind of like, oh, I double booked. My bad. I forgot. I'll stay here.
Yeah,
Because
he picked him up
obviously,
from it. I think he picked up the. Did he pick up when he called the house phone
yes.
or the cell
Yeah.
phone?
Hmm.
I don't remember. Yeah, yeah.
And
He
then
then
basically, oh, I double booked. My bad. Like, I'm going to stay here and hang out.
yeah,
And he
yeah,
hung up, and his girlfriend's mom pulled him aside in like the kitchen, was like, are you good? And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I just accidentally forgot that I was also supposed to do this with Brian today. And she's like, no, it's not
What's going
normal.
on?
It's not normal for your, for Brian to call your, like, your boyfriend's girlfriend, like your girlfriend's phone
Right, right.
multiple
And their
times.
house, their
And it's,
family
yes.
house phone at that.
And that's when he was like, oh, he's acting kind of strange. And
Yeah,
so his girlfriend's mom was nice enough to be like, we're going to therapy and you're talking about it.
yeah.
And then he
Yeah,
ended up
they
not,
mentioned, she says, I'm
yeah,
taking him because then she calls Drake's mom and says, "This is what's going on. I'm taking him to
yes,
our family." I think she said family therapist. I
yes.
want to say,
And
yeah.
then
She said, "I'm
obviously
taking him
Drake
there."
was not comfortable enough to talk about it
No,
with the therapist enough. So he said, oh, nothing happens. Like, we're good. It's just kind of weird sometimes. But like,
yeah,
at that point, again, you're 14, 15 years old. You're now being forced to go to a therapist. What are you
mm-hmm.
supposed to do? Just be like, by the way, he's been touching me. Like,
Touching, please. That's. Oh my God,
like,
it's putting it mildly.
yes, that's the nicest way you can put it. And it,
Inappropriate behavior is
yes,
it's just full on. It's just full on rape, sexual
yep.
assault, abuse. Yes,
And then,
any
but
any
like,
one of the three that you want to
again,
pick.
and it's bad for anyone going through that. But imagine like your 15-year-old boy now having to go to a therapist, and they're expecting you to tell the therapist everything that happened.
Yeah,
Like, God. And then
yeah.
so
I mean,
of course, he doesn't tell the therapist. And then one day, like months later or whatever, he finally just calls his mom and just tells her everything.
yeah,
And he was like, I don't know what compelled me to do that this day, but like I could not get through it. Something
yeah.
compelled me, and I just like
I just told her everything.
told her
Yeah,
everything. So he went
yeah.
home. She called the police, and then they were able to call him, and they were recording him the entire time
Mhm.
talking to Brian. And even Brian at that point was like, you're recording me, aren't you? And he
Yeah,
still confessed. Not that
yeah,
he not that he shouldn't have confessed, but like he knows he got caught. He knows he's being recorded and he's like, fine. Yeah, I did this.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and again, I don't know what would be worse. You confessing or you denying and being like, that never happened.
yeah. I mean, I guess it's not like it's just bad
I
overall.
guess at
It's
that point
just
it's just like, all right. Like I got caught. I did it.
yeah. I just feel
It's and then
it's
yeah.
so unbelievable to just look back and be like, this is even before, if I'm being
Oh,
corrected,
yep.
this is
Mhm.
even before Drake and Josh
Yes, so when they
is
in
even
the
on the air.
documentary, they were like, as this was going on, like the trial and everything, that's
Yeah,
when Drake and Josh like actually started airing.
right, right,
And so
right.
imagine not only are you've been abused, you have to go to court.
Mhm,
You have to find out that he's only getting 16 months in prison
mhm.
for 11 charges, I think it was.
Yeah, I believe he only pled guilty to two of them.
Yep.
Yep.
And
So
then you have to go through the worst thing in your entire life and then film a whole series
yeah,
that and
where
no
you're supposed
one
to be
knew.
this like this
Mm,
this, and it's supposed to be this comedic, lighthearted show
yeah.
about like a silly, like two silly, goofy teenagers,
Yes.
and you're just supposed to go to work and just put this face on and
Yeah.
just
As if like you didn't just go
tell your jokes
through the
now.
shittiest
Yeah, it's
thing in
like,
your
oh, you
life.
just went through
Yeah.
trauma. Now go tell your jokes now.
Yep.
Like,
And then the one thing I will say, I don't like Dan Schneider, but he did go up to Drake and was like, "Hey, was this you?"
yeah,
And then
this
when
was the
Drake,
only
yeah,
redeemable thing that was
and then
shown about him throughout the entire show or the
Drake
entire
said
documentary.
yes, he just broke down and was like, "Do you? What do you need me to do? Do you need anything? What can I
Yeah.
do? And I was like, that's the only good thing come out of Dan Schneider's mouth
Mhm.
was like
Yeah.
sticking up for
Yeah.
him. Because
Yeah.
even though I think Dan Schneider is creepy and the whole feet thing and he's kind of weird, like I don't
He's
know,
a piece of shit,
he
basically.
doesn't seem like someone that would actually go as far as Brian Peck would.
Yeah.
He just seems like he's creepy and weird.
Yeah, but to be fair, they did have all of those bits about him being alone with Amanda, and that was kind of
Oh
left
yeah,
to
that's
you
true.
just don't know what
Yeah.
happened. Like I don't know if it was just him. I don't know. We don't know because
Yes.
there was literally like Amanda did not give any type of testimony. She did not want. I believe they reached out to her, and there was like reports. Like I believe it was like a lawyer of hers that said even the idea of it traumatized her. Like even just coming in to do
Mm-hmm.
an interview like made her have some type of
And
like
it
I
does make
believe
yeah,
they
it
refer
does
to it
make
as
you
like some type
wonder.
of PTSD thing, like a
Yeah.
response.
So is
So
it a response as in I also went through that? I don't want to
we don't
be a
know,
part of it, or is
and
it just like even though I wasn't a victim, everyone else was like you don't know. And
yeah,
then what got me a lot too was the fact that during the trial, it said in total 41 people wrote letters of support for Brian, which are used to influence the judges during sentencing. So I guess,
yeah,
and I don't know if this is every case or if it is, like you said, a celebrity thing, but that shouldn't even be allowed
no,
because
not at all.
judges are supposed to be as fair as possible. And if you're giving one side the chance to have all these letters to support them, but then have Drake have nothing besides his testimony, you know, it's just crazy. And then it says many of the letters asked for the judge to put Peck on probation rather than having him serve any time in prison. And the most recognizable names that voiced their support were Ron Melendez. I don't know who that is.
Hmm.
Alan Thicke, James Marsden, which do you remember who he is?
Yeah,
Corny
hairspray.
Collins. Yes,
Hmm.
and he worked with Amanda on that too. Um,
Yeah,
Ryder
yeah.
Strong and
Yeah,
Will.
two of the guys from Boy Meets
Yeah,
World,
and
which
then
I believe
Will. Yeah,
Brian worked with them on Boy Meets World.
yeah, Will from Boy Meets World, and then the Amanda Show's co-star Taron Killam,
Yeah, yeah, and he was
and
he
he
was
was
in
on Big Fat Liar.
yep, and uh, that's another Dan Schneider production right there,
Yep,
and that's also Amanda there again.
yep,
So it's
and
just like
I'm
the
and
threads are
then
there, you know.
yes, and there was a lot of the um I don't know who Killam. I've seen
Yeah,
the effects this situation has had on Brian, and I know for a fact that he regrets any mistakes made.
which is insane to me because at the
It's
time,
not
if
like
this
you
is
can
all
say,
coming,
"Oh, he accidentally like stole a bunch of things,"
yeah,
or he did
yeah,
accidentally did something that's like it's bad, but it's not the worst thing in the world.
yeah,
He did
yeah.
the unspeakable, and then James Marsden noted, "I he's known Peck for 14 years. I assure you, what Brian has been through in the last year is the suffering of 100 men."
I
So
don't know if
basically,
people were. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off there.
oh
Sorry,
no,
keep
but
going.
like I thought, oh, maybe some people didn't know what was going on. Like there was the one girl, I forget her name, but they did mention her in the documentary where she supported Brian. And then years later, when it came out that it was, what it was, she took her statement back and was like, if I had known it was this bad, I would have never supported him.
Yeah,
But wouldn't you
I
know it's
just
that bad to begin with if he's going to court for sexual abuse of a minor? Like,
yeah. Again, it just comes down to like this toxic and weird
yeah,
like default to victim blame.
yeah.
Like some of the statements that they were saying, it was just like
Yep.
this is involving a child. You're adult. Like this was like I'm not even talking about when they were talking about like Taran Killam or like the people that were still like around like a middle, like a young like teen age, like you know what I mean? Because like Taran Killam was on Big Fat Liar and stuff, so like he was still like the people from Boy Meets World. They were all still like young-ish, but maybe they were just like
Mm-hmm.
not aware of things. But there was also adults that were like I think it was the multiple adults on there that were like like mentioning like temptation. I'm like this is a child. If there's any
Yeah.
mention of it being involving a child, that thought shouldn't even come into your
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Yeah.
That's
And
grotesque in
yes.
itself,
Yes. And a
in my
lot of the
opinion.
comments that I were seeing were saying, because I think even the one letter was like, he would have never done that if he wasn't pressured into doing that or something like that. And I
In
just
what
think,
world is
how,
that
yes,
the case?
in what world is a 45-year-old man or whatever being pressured to do sexual things to someone that's 14 or 15? You're
I
the
just don't.
adult. So if a 14 or 15-year-old is coming to you and trying to do those things to you, if you end up caving in, that's your fault because you're a damn adult.
Yeah,
Like
it's just like it
you,
was
it's
blowing my
not like
mind.
you
How many of
saying,
them?
yeah, it's not like you saying a 15-year-old is doing things to another minor, or someone that's
Right.
18 is doing something, was pressured by someone that was 15, because they're both young enough where like, okay, maybe he was pressured, but someone that is 40 years old cannot be pressured by someone that's 15 to do things.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense
Yes.
that even that way that the adult that people who were adults when this court hearing took place were just like
Yeah.
just blatant victim blaming. It was
Yeah.
just I was
And
just and there's 41 letters in total,
yes.
so it's like how many of those like there probably are a couple of them who are like young like teens or like maybe like early 20s,
Yeah.
but probably the majority of these people writing these letters are around the same age as Brian,
Mhm.
probably, or maybe even older. So
Yep.
it's like how are you not taking the victim side? How are you
Yep. And
like
then
it's just in
um
this is
oh yeah.
again, it's just like this is one of the just I just don't understand. I
Mhm.
just don't understand.
And then
It's
so
it's so
Will
sad.
and Ryder made a comment about it because they were
Mhm.
writing the letters of support. So I
Yeah.
think it
Yeah.
says, when there's an actual victim involved, I am now on the abuser's side, and that's the thing I can't get over. And so, to be clear, though, he didn't say anything happened. So I guess what they're saying is they were pressured into kind of believing Brian.
Uh,
And so by the
okay.
time
Well,
we heard
that's
about the case and knew anything about it,
yeah.
everything was taken out of context.
Right.
And
Right.
obviously, they were victims of jailbait. There was this hot guy. I just did this thing and he's underage. And we bought that storyline as opposed to saying, whoa, I'm a grown man who's over 40. So maybe the way he did explain it was like there's this younger guy, but I don't know. The
I
whole,
no, the I don't really like
yeah,
I'm
it's very
glad that they
confusing. I'm
are
trying to
now
read it, but like,
recanting. I'm glad that now the guys from um Boy Meets World are kind of like recanting or at least
yes.
having some kind of guilt with what they said.
Mm-hmm.
But I again, I don't know. They're also they can't be older than because Boy Meets World was in like what the 90s, I want to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so like I don't even know like still if they were adults at the time as well, they should have been like, well, this is weird because this is a
Yeah.
kid.
Yep.
So I just don't. I just it's just classic. Again,
Yes.
this is more things like this have come to light with the Me Too movement about how like
Mm-hmm.
you can't just because this guy is your friend, your coworker, your colleague, or you have good experience with them.
Yes.
You got to look at the facts here. They have
Yeah.
victims that are coming
And
forward.
so Drake Bell then said Will was not manipulated. Brian admitted it to Will, and he wrote the letter anyway. Then he worked with me on so many episodes of Spider-Man years later, and he never said a word to me about it. This is because they were,
Spider-Man.
I guess
Do you know what
maybe,
that is, David?
no.
I've never, yeah,
I
I've
guess
never
maybe
heard of.
there's a cartoon Spider-Man somewhere.
Maybe,
But
maybe.
it says this is because they were told there was letters. Oh, told that the letters are going to be made public. So I guess Will
Mm,
never spoke with Drake Bell about the letter,
yeah,
and because everyone thought that the letters were going to be sealed forever and no one would see them. So like, what's the point of bringing it up? And then he said, Ryder Strong said he was a minor during that time. But Drake Bell
mm,
said no, he was 24 years old when he wrote the letter and was told by Brian what he did. And he wrote the letter anyway. So they're trying to claim that they were young enough where they were manipulated by Brian to write these letters, but they were both in their mid 20s. And he clearly stated to both of them what he did.
yeah. I just,
And it's all over the place. And it's just,
yeah, I just
I,
the thing that broke my heart is when he Drake talked about how when he walked into the courtroom, he was like, "You see, Brian's side is full." He's like, "And my side
mhm,
is me, my mom, and my
yep.
brother."
And the fact that
Yeah,
he never told his dad up until, you know, later on.
more recent. Yeah,
So
after
his
this at
dad
all.
was not at the courthouse either because he didn't tell his dad.
Right, right.
And
Because
I
you
think,
know, if that
yeah,
man knew, he would have been front and center,
hmm
standing next to him.
his mom,
The
yeah,
way that he supported his son from the beginning,
yes,
you
and
know that he
his,
would have been
oh
there
yeah, and
if
his
he knew.
mom spoke up about to like Brian, but then Drake was like, I did not say anything to Brian directly. I
No.
spoke to everyone in the courthouse.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
that was, and oh my God. And again, he did horrible things and he knows that he did those horrible things and he owns up to it.
Yeah.
Just kind of like Gypsy Rose, where like everyone, there's the half of people that support her and say, good for you for, you know, doing what you did. And then the other half is like, it doesn't make it right, no matter how much she was abused.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not okay that he's also became the abuser, but look at his life. He probably
Yeah.
would have turned out just fine if he wasn't abused. And then you think
Yeah.
about so many other Disney and Nickelodeon people. Demi Lovato had alcohol or like drug problems for most of her life
Mhm.
and almost died like 10 times.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
something must have happened that got to that point.
Yeah.
And it's
I
just,
mean, we're not born with these issues.
no.
It's your environment. It's the
Yes.
people you're around. It's your
It's,
experiences that shape you.
yes. It's your family. You know, maybe you do have
Mhm.
family members that are like that. Or
Yeah.
in Drake's case, his family was all right. Besides the divorce, like it didn't seem
Yeah,
as
but
though there were
otherwise
any
it didn't seem
issues
like that
that would
was
have,
the I mean,
yeah,
because he had a very good relationship with his father.
yep.
Oh.
And his dad and him were so close up until that point. And
Mhm.
so now I feel like Drake also, not only did he become an abuser himself, like looking back, he lost his dad for like years.
Yeah.
The only person
Arguably
that
the biggest
truly, hmm
supported him and was
yeah,
there
the
for
only
him.
person that truly cared enough and
Mhm.
tried to look out for him, he cut him
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of manipulation and
Yep,
Brian, they use that term, I believe with Dan and Brian, they use the term like putting the wedge
yep.
between them.
Because Dan did it with Amanda and her parents,
Mhm.
where like
Mhm.
her
Which that
parents were
was
trying their,
wild.
yeah, and they were trying their best to look out for her, but he made it
Yeah.
seem like they didn't want the best for her. And so they were
Yeah.
trying, he was trying to help her get emancipated from her family.
Mhm. Yep.
It didn't
Yep,
work
yep,
out,
yep.
right? I don't think it,
No.
no.
No. No. No. But then that was because then when that falls through is when the relationship well, like the relationship and the connection of working of Amanda working with Dan Schneider gets cut off when
Hmm.
that happens, when the emancipation doesn't go through. Is
Yep.
when basically when their relationship severs, which is when Dan Schneider basically realizes, oh, I lost my star. I
Yep.
gotta get a new one.
Yes.
So then I believe Amanda that goes into the whole Drake and Josh thing. So
Mm-hmm.
he just finds a new
Yes.
favorite, to just
And then there's an article. I don't know how truthful this article is, but it's Hollywood Reporter, so maybe it is. But it says like Dan Schneider breaks his silence after watching the documentary. It
mm-hmm.
says, watching over the past 2 nights was really difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and I regret. I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology. And then he goes, when I watched the show, I could see the hurt in some people's eyes, and it made me feel awful and regretful and sorry. I wish I could go back, especially to those earlier years in my career, and bring the growth and the experience that I have now and do a better
Yeah,
job. And never
yeah.
ever feel like it was okay to be an asshole to anyone ever.
Yeah.
That's what he's
I
saying.
mean I
Whether or
mean,
not he's actually being truthful, looks like there might be a video on it, but I
yeah.
don't know.
We have no way of knowing whether that's just because it just seems a little too,
Yeah,
in my opinion, it just seems a little too convenient that he's saying these things now.
now, but maybe
I
I
mean,
don't
there
know.
is a whole truth to like the mirror of it all, like putting like seeing like going outside yourself and seeing what you're doing in front of your face.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So maybe there is some truth to that of him realizing
And also,
what had
like,
been done. But I
he's,
just don't
yeah,
see from his history of what he's been and like this power dynamic individual. Like I do believe that people can heal and change and get better,
yeah.
but I just
And
there's just too
he
much doubt
stepped
there for me.
away. Yeah, and then he stepped away from Nickelodeon in 2014. They parted ways.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
hasn't done anything related to Nickelodeon since then. And it's
No.
been a good 10 years. So maybe within those 10 years, plus the documentary coming out, maybe he is really sorry. There's no way of
Yeah.
knowing it. But he was also
Right.
saying how obviously Drake Bell came up to him and told him what happened, and he was devastated. And I told him I was here for him, which was true. Um, and
Yeah.
then it says, this is also from Dan Schneider. That was probably the darkest part of my career. And here's the kicker that I really don't get. After Brian got out of prison and he was a registered sex offender, he was hired on Disney Channel. I don't understand that. Me neither.
No. I don't.
Like if you want to claim the whole Nickelodeon never knew, they
Yeah.
probably didn't because again, back then there was nothing out there like there is now to say, "Oh, we did this background check, whatever." They're not going to go
Yeah.
out of their way to call your local prison and be like, "Hey, has he been convicted of anything?" So
Right.
if someone was convicted of any crimes, unless it's a big news story, like he murdered somebody, you're not going to know what they do outside of work. Their resume
Right.
is not going to say it. So I
Yeah.
don't think necessarily like with Nickelodeon, it's their fault for getting something
Yeah.
like that. But like
Yeah. Because I
Disney
mean,
Channel, at this point in
they're
time,
they they
you that
really
you
they
fucked
really
up.
said
You
we do
know.
not see it. We
Yes.
do not, like, they really just covered their eyes fully
Yeah.
and chose not to see it because it's like
Mhm.
you see that this guy had a court case that I it was probably, I mean, there was like magazines, there was still like semi like pop like I know paparazzi wasn't as big of a thing, but there was definitely some type of publication of certain
Yes.
things,
So,
like whether it even be like a newspaper, you
mhm.
know?
And
Like,
it had to be out there that there was a court case on Brian Peck for abuse of a child. Even if it didn't say Drake Bell, which it didn't at the
right,
time,
because he was, I believe he until he spoke in the documentary, I believe they referred to him as a
John
John Doe.
Doe. Yep.
Yeah,
And so if I'm a company and I'm looking into hiring this person, and there's a news article, there's a TV thing, there's something out there that there was any sort of abuse towards children, it would not be on another network for children. You wouldn't even set
yeah,
foot on the lot.
yeah.
And the fact
I
that he
mean,
was on, yes,
I
and
need
he
a
was,
statement from Disney.
oh yes,
Like,
oh God, right.
I don't even know if they're gonna. They're probably just not gonna say anything.
No.
Because like at this point, the people that probably hired him probably don't even work there anymore.
Oh
Is
yeah.
my guess. You know.
And then I forget who it was, but there was two other people, like a husband and wife, that knew Brian that were also in the letters, I think. They ended up
Yeah, I know
working,
exactly who
yeah,
you're talking about.
they ended up working on Disney as well, on
Mm-hmm.
um what's it called? Drake or Zach and Cody.
Sweet Life.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were working on that show when he got
Mm-hmm.
hired, and they claimed they had
Yeah.
nothing to do with him getting hired. If it were
Yeah, I think
me,
I have the.
yeah, if it were me and I knew that that guy was getting hired, I'd have been like, hey, just so you know, in case you guys didn't already know, here's his situation. You might not want him near children.
Yeah.
You would think he
I
wouldn't even
don't.
be allowed to get a job like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there was ways of concealing his status as like, because did
Yeah.
he also? I'm assuming he also, because if the guy Jason had to do it, I'm assuming, I would hope
Oh,
Brian had
yeah,
to
he did.
register as a sex
Yep,
offender as
he
well.
did.
So I don't know if there was ways of them. I don't know if that was like things that they were able to keep private. If that was like able to be like private
Because
information, you
now,
know?
because now you have websites like Megan's Law, where any sort
Right.
of sex offenders, when you register, you're on there. It shows you where
Right.
you live, how long you're
Yep.
on there for, what you did, what you look
Yeah.
like, your car, your job.
Yeah.
I don't know
And
if that
now
existed back then. I don't think so because Megan's Law
let's
was
see.
named
Let's
after, um, because it was named after the
let's
one.
Google research in real time here.
Yeah, Megan's Law is the name of the federal law in the U.S. Requiring law enforcement authorities to make information available to sex offenders in response to the murder of Megan Kanka.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's a rape and murder of 7-year-old Megan in New Jersey
Did
by
they say what year was that? Do we know?
um, 1994. So it's actually,
Okay.
but I don't know when Megan's Law, the website, was made.
Right. Again, it's the whole thing of things transitioning
Yes.
from being on paper and forms to
Yeah.
being
So it
online and
says,
readily available to basically
yes.
anyone.
So Megan's Law
So,
was signed into law by Bill Clinton in 1996. So
okay.
so 2 years after she was murdered,
Okay.
um, Megan's Law was made. And then obviously Google wasn't a thing until 1998.
Right.
So who knows when the actual website was created.
Creative.
So international,
Um,
and then there's international Megan's Law was signed by Obama in 2016. So internationally, that hasn't been a thing since a few years ago.
yeah. I just
And so, like, who
Megan's Law
knows, even
creative.
though they are registered as a sex offender, there's probably nothing stated until recently because, again, internet and Google and all that's not really around.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's no way for a place like Nickelodeon to check, but there's, by then, definitely a way for um, Disney to know about it.
Yeah, I just don't because like it's just it's
It's,
amazing to me.
yes,
I do see here they said in 2006 Congress passed the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, which fully revamped the federal standards for sex offender registration and notification and repealed the federal standards outlined in the Wetterling Act.
yes.
So maybe that's 2006 when this is put into place. So I believe this is after
That's, yeah,
the trial. So maybe, and it does state here that there was changes and revisions made state by state, and now in present day they all stand on the same policies. But who's to say that back then Maybe in California,
Oh,
it was
that's
not the
true.
case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because even now, like with different issues, there's um there's like state laws that can be different than just
Yes.
like the national law. So
Yep.
who's to say that back then when the trial, excuse me, was happening, that there was probably loose or like messy just ways of going
Yeah.
about the actual registration of being a sex offender.
Yeah. And I'm
So
looking it up to see if Brian's actually on the list. I'm assuming once you're on as a sex offender, you're always on it. I don't think you
yeah,
can
I
ever
would hope
just.
that it no, no. I think you have to be on it for life.
Oh yeah, he's on
I
there.
don't, yeah, yeah. I don't see there's any way that you come back from that or like
Yeah.
redeem.
So
Like you don't, you have to be, because you need. I know that they had to they where we live in our apartment building, there is not in our building, but there is someone in a building close to us that is a like registered sex offender, and they have to let everybody in the neighborhood know that.
yep.
So we got like a notification through our like, I believe our like online like portal, like which is, people all know. Like you have to know. Everyone
Yeah.
within like a certain radius of where they live has to know, because we're right around the corner also from a school. So
Oh, yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so
So
like at least the Megan's Law website where we live is more detailed, I feel like. But this one just says just it obviously describes what it was. And then it says year of last conviction, 2004, year of last release, 2005. But it doesn't actually say anything else besides what happened. But at least on ours website, like you can see what car they drive. I think you can see their license plate number. You can see where they work. You can see so much more. This isn't really giving you too much information besides what happened and like the year they were convicted. And it says like if they
hmm
have any tattoos, it would say that on there.
yeah. Well, it's probably anything that identifies them. They
Yeah.
probably would be like tattoos, piercings,
Yeah, this
scars,
yep, for him
things like that.
it says scars, marking, and tattoos. The right
Yeah,
thigh and then pierced left ear.
yeah.
And obviously it
So
shows
then,
you their weight, their height. And I
hmm
assume every year or every like 3 years you have to get like an updated photo. I
yeah.
think obviously
Or
you
like if
have
something about your appearance changed, like if
yes.
you get a new tattoo, new piercing, have a new scar on your body for whatever
Yes.
reason, So
And what's really bothering me about this is that in Brian's picture he's smiling.
yeah,
Of course
I
he is.
just I can't get that image of him out of my head, and I couldn't, like, as I was watching the documentary and looking at it, I couldn't get the image out of my head of him smiling while holding the plate of pickles.
Yes.
That's just what.
And obviously again that was the whole bit, but it's still just
Yeah.
it oh
But
my
now
god.
just knowing this is a
Yeah.
abuser, this is a pedophile, this is a John Wayne Gacy pen pal.
Oh.
It's just the
Well,
whole thing becomes
yep.
very, very eerie.
Yeah.
It's grotesque. I've probably used that word like 15 times since we started recording, but
Yeah,
it's
and then
there's no other way to describe it.
the entire time I'm watching this, I just
Yeah,
wanted to throw up. I had to pause it multiple times.
yeah,
I was just saying, what the fuck the entire time.
yeah, yeah.
I
Because this
just,
is this is the this is the shows that we grew up with. Again, out of all the networks on
mhm.
TV for kids, the Nickelodeon was the one that I frequented the most.
And I,
You know?
now I kind of want them to do a Disney one. I don't
Yeah.
think Disney had, and again, we won't
I'm
know unless they
I
come out with
mean,
this stuff.
not we didn't know any of this,
Yes.
so who's to say that there wasn't this going on in Disney? Because if
Yes.
Disney was willing to not care to that Brian had that court case and still hire him,
Yep.
who's this there? Where do your morals lie? You
Yes.
know, so
And
I
so,
wouldn't be
like,
surprised
yeah, you won't know until they come out with something.
if they ever do. But
It
Disney
seems
is
as
also
though,
such a
and
big. The
it's
difference
crazy
with
because at least,
you go and then I'll say what
yeah,
I'm gonna say.
I noticed at least with Disney, I don't know, there's a good chunk of stars that came out of Disney perfectly fine. Then there's
Hmm
ones that had a bunch of issues.
Yeah.
But it always seemed like there was like drug related problems and DUIs.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem.
I mean, there's like that classic like child star thing of just like you're losing your childhood and you
Yeah,
just are put in the spotlight and you're in this like individual situation that most children don't go through, where you just
yes,
lose your childhood and you just are in front of all of these, like the world watches you grow up.
yes,
And to a degree, it's just not, when you think about it, it's just not natural.
yep,
It's not supposed to happen to children. It's not supposed to.
no,
I mean, fame in general. Like when you're an adult and you're older, and you like, if you like become famous, like when you're fully an adult, you have like more of a choice, I guess, to see like, oh, okay, I'm getting into this. People are gonna know who I am. I'm in the spotlight. But
yep,
when they become like, a lot of these kids start acting when they're like
like,
young,
yep.
very young. So
They
it's like they
start out in
just
like
get that. They don't get.
commercials
They get
and
that.
yeah,
Yeah, they get that choice taken away from them.
yep.
So
And no wonder so many stars end up doing horrible things
yeah, yeah.
because
The next
a
thing,
lot of the Disney stars,
yeah.
DUIs. The one guy from Lemonade Mouth, um,
Mhm.
Adam Hicks, he went to prison. Forget what he went to
Yeah.
prison for, but he was on the Ned's Declassified pod, and I think he talked about it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and he was a teen then. You
Right.
know, it's just crazy the outcome of children as they get
Mhm.
older when they start out in the limelight.
Yeah. I mean, there's just the to go back to Dan Schneider related shows. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos and work from the girl Nicole on Zoe 101,
Mm-hmm.
Alexa. She has basically started like a whole foundation, and she's constantly doing protesting, just involving protection and
Yep.
safety for child actors.
Yes.
You know, and just like I think she has, what is her podcast called? I have to look it up.
Oh, it's gonna
But I
be
believe she's actually
yes.
going, I think she went live earlier today, like even just talking about the whole Dan Schneider apology thing.
Yep.
Does it match the source? Yeah, her is this just a podcast, or no, it's basically like a whole, like I guess like a movement. She calls it Eat Predators. So it's like
Oh.
artivism
Mm-hmm.
against predatory behavior. So she literally organized protests regularly to protest outside Nickelodeon. She says next protest literally took place today on the 19th. So she is actively working to
Yes.
fight for rights and protections for childhood actors and retributions for those who have been
Yes.
victims.
And a
Yeah,
lot of people, I think, are saying, well, you know, that whole thing is supporting people like Drake when he's a predator himself. But he's also a victim.
right, right.
And like obviously you
But I'm
don't
sure that they understand that, but it's still, even like it's still evident of the abuse that he went through, and I
yes.
still am glad that he eventually did find the courage to tell his story,
Oh
because
yeah.
this this is preventing things happening like this in the future,
Yeah. And
or
then
trying to.
what got me too, because you sent it to me this morning,
Hmm.
obviously Jeanette McCurdy was on iCarly and then she went on to do Sam and Cat. She had
Hmm.
a horrible experience on both shows. One,
Yeah.
because her mom was just a horrible person
Yeah,
and was trying to,
classic stage mom.
yeah, taking money from
Living
her.
vicariously, right? I'm living vicariously through you. I mean, I don't know if you should, if you didn't. I read her
Oh,
audiobook.
I
Like I
need to.
listened to
I need,
her.
yeah,
You need
yeah.
to, because it just gives so much perspective. And she never refers to Dan Schneider by his name.
Hmm.
I'm guessing because she didn't want any type of retributions, didn't want to
Oh,
get
yeah.
sued,
I
all of
mean,
that. She
obviously,
calls
yeah,
him,
the
yeah,
creator.
she calls him the creator.
Yep.
Exactly, exactly.
And
So she had the abuse from her mom, and then it seems like with Dan Schneider, with her, as of right now, it doesn't seem like there's any type of like obviously there's like the creepy stuff about like filming their feet and inappropriate things, but it doesn't seem like he specifically,
yeah,
like there wasn't, it wasn't a Brian Peck situation. It doesn't seem
no,
like there was
but there
direct
was
sexual abuse,
no, but there was definitely
but
inappropriate things
yeah,
done,
yeah, and like
but
verbal
not to the
abuse,
point of Brian Peck, at
right?
least that we know of.
Right.
And so, but what got me is that video of Drake talking with Tana Mojo about it.
Josh Peck.
Yes. Yeah. Josh talking about it with Tana Mojo.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
she just, the entire time those two were talking, he just was like, we're the good guys, we're the good guys. But then was basically trying to say that what Jeanette went through wasn't real, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
the way,
basically like
yeah.
discounted her entire thing. He basically was saying like her memoir was like BS. Like he was just
Yes.
kind of like dismissing it,
Because,
which is such a specific thing for him to do against
yes.
her, which is just weird because it's like I don't think they ever worked on a show
No, they
together. I
didn't.
don't think they were. It
They
was two
just
different
knew
like
they were
eras of
associated by,
Nickelodeon.
yeah, they were associated by Miranda Cosgrove because they both
Yeah.
worked with her. So, like,
Yeah.
obviously they're friendly enough with each other. And even when her
Right.
memoir first came out,
Right.
he shared about it and he was like, you go, girl, like, you know, proud of you, friend, or something. And he was in support of it. But now the whole thing with Dan Schneider's coming out, and now it's like, oh, that wasn't real. I Dan
And you're
Schneider
taking
was always so
the
nice
worst
to,
take
yeah.
possible.
And he
Worst take
always, yeah, and
possible.
he always made it seem like, well, that didn't happen to me. Dan was always nice to me.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh, he was just like I
Yes.
was like I was very my blood was boiling when I was listening to this video.
Yes.
He was like, "Oh, he's just like a bad boss."
He was
What?
just a tough he was always a tough
Like
boss, but that was it. Sort of
like
situation. And like,
but how
okay,
dare he like dismiss other people's experiences
yes.
just because that's not his
Like,
experience.
good for you, you never had to experience that. Glad
Right.
you didn't, but other
Right.
people
We don't
clearly
wish
did.
abuse on
And not,
anyone,
yeah, and not
obviously,
just
but
Jeanette McCurdy, your own co-star, who you were the closest with,
yeah.
endured abuse like that. And you're going to sit there and say Jeanette's experience wasn't real.
It's just bizarre. It's
It's
bizarre for him to have that take. Weird
like,
and
I'm
bizarre.
like, he better be lucky and like glad that he never had to go through any of that.
Yeah. I
And
just
so for him, like, you should have just said, I'm sorry you went through that, you know, although I didn't go through that. I'm sorry that you did, and I'm glad you're speaking up. And then just move on. Or if it's
right.
really
I mean it
uncomfortable to talk about, you say
yeah.
that. Just say, I'm really sorry. This is not something I experienced. I can't speak up about it because I didn't have those same experiences.
Right.
And then move on.
Yeah.
And then to
It's
say, but then he was trying to say, like, oh, and we had a whole podcast episode. And she was our first guest, and she didn't want it aired, so we didn't air it. It's like maybe
which again, she has the right to say that because it's like this
her
is her
experience.
word, her experience, right? If
And
she decides in the end that I don't want this to air,
you can't air
that's
it.
the way it goes. That's the way it
And
goes,
maybe
right?
she also doesn't want it aired because you're making comments about her experiences.
Right. Who's to
They,
say
they're,
when they recorded that he wasn't being like
yes.
dismissive or weird about it? You know?
Hmm.
We'll never know because it doesn't air. But I can just bet that maybe that's probably why she probably got like it was done, and or maybe she just had second thoughts. We don't know. There could have been a million
Yes.
reasons, but it's just like he was giving a little bit in that video that he was like, oh, pissed off because like
Yes.
we didn't get to air that interview.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
he
oh,
made it
okay,
seem
cool.
like,
Like,
oh, but I know Dan. He's fine. Like, type of
yeah,
like, oh, it didn't happen to me, then it didn't happen at all.
right. Right. It
Mm,
was given what he was with the way he was talking about, which again, this just shows how these cycles just continue, just like and this toxic behavior like just doesn't end, and you see how it goes on, and we claim like oh things are getting better, but there's always going to be toxic people because what he's when he's Josh is talking about Jeanette is giving the classic victim blaming like how the other people were talking about the Brian Peck situation with
yes.
Drake. It's giving the exact same thing,
Hmm.
very similar
Because
energy,
I didn't
and
have
it made
those
me very
experience.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. You can, someone could be the nicest person to you, but be shitty to
Right.
everyone else.
Right.
And he's still a nice guy to you. Great
Yeah.
that you had a good experience with Dan. Oh, he was a little tough at times, but other than that, he was fine. good for you
Yeah.
for never having to be mentally or physically abused by someone. But there is Jeanette, Drake, pretty much all that cast, you know. And then
Yeah.
two female writers. You have multiple other people that are coming and speaking up about it. You don't have the right to say it didn't happen.
Right.
Just say
Not at
it
all.
didn't happen to me and then move on. Like that
Yeah.
annoyed me so much. I was so
Yeah.
angry when I was
I
listening to that.
just, yeah. I mean, it's asinine. He's just,
Yes.
it's
And then
gross.
it
That's gross.
then it it brings me back to remember when Drake was pissed off because he didn't get invited to Josh's
Josh's
wedding.
wedding. Yeah.
And back then you're like, what's the like I get that they were co-stars and friends back then, but if Josh doesn't want to invite him, so be it. Maybe there was a falling out. And all during all that time you kind of you're on Josh's side because you're like, why is he freaking out so much? Like,
Yeah.
what's the big deal? And there was all, and that's also when all the other stuff with Drake was going on. But
Hmm.
now that I'm watching Drake or Josh talking to Tana Mojo, I'm like, maybe it was Josh all along. Like, maybe Drake was fine and Josh didn't, like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, these are like famous people that we will not know the
Yeah,
true nature of what's going on,
yeah,
but it's kind of giving like he's just like, oh, I don't want to
yeah,
deal with this. I don't want him in my life anymore.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
I just, ugh.
This
But if
this
you
whole
haven't,
documentary is
yes, but if you
just,
haven't watched it, like, first of all, prepare yourself
yeah,
because
it's
it's a
gonna be a
lot
lot.
to
It's probably gonna be
watch.
one of the most. It's probably gonna be one of the most like hardest things for anybody to watch, but especially if you grew up with these shows and have
Yes,
nostalgia attached to them,
which
because
is
it's just like
yeah, and it's
you're just saying
crazy.
like your childhood and it's
Hmm.
very the dark, like it's literally like what is the dark truth like behind kids TV, like it's
Yeah.
just we truly were just looking at this with rose colored glasses. We didn't know what was going on,
Hmm.
you know.
And it's like
So
so like when a celebrity dies, and
yeah.
it's, some people are like, oh, they died. That's like sad. But then other
Yeah.
people are like really bent out of shape about it because this was their childhood. This was their celebrity that they looked up to. Matthew
Hmm.
Perry died. Like that was a huge thing for the both of us because we were like, oh my God.
Yeah, because
Like,
we watched
yes.
Friends in college. That was a big part
So,
of our friendship.
some people could be like, why do
So
you care? Or
yeah,
blah, blah, blah. But to like us, you know,
it was
late,
important.
mid to late 20s, early 30s, like we grew up with this. So this
Yeah.
documentary, watching it, was like the most shocking thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was just, the entire time, I was like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
how did any of this happen? How did any of these people get away with what they did? Like, it's insane.
I don't know.
Mm.
I think a good place to end. I wrote this quote down, and it literally made a tear roll down my face when they were saying it. It's the end of the documentary, and I think this is a good place to end. I think that given the subject matter, we're not really going to get into any type of like our typical format with the fun Facebook memory or anything
Oh,
like that. I
yes.
think we should just maybe
I'll
just,
save those for next week because I do have
yeah,
plans.
well, this will be a little. This will be
Yes.
nice. Next time will be more lighthearted. This just affected us both so greatly that we just had to just talk about it. This is basically just going to be like, at this point, it's probably going to be as long as the documentary itself. But we just had so much to say,
Yes.
and I know that we're not the only people who had a lot
Oh,
to
yeah.
say. This has just affected so many people in our generations. I know I've talked to friends about it, coworkers. A lot of people are
Hmm.
just so affected by what has happened. So I'm going to end on a quote that when the documentary is ending, it's a scene of Drake and his dad outside
Oh,
of the lot,
yes.
and the dad goes. He puts his arm around Drake, and it's literally making me emotional thinking about it. He goes, "Better days are coming, kid," and then Drake goes, "I keep hearing that," and then his dad
Yes.
goes, "Well, you got to keep listening."
Yes. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God.
because you could just tell that like in Drake's voice there was a little bit of just like he's kind of like tired. Like he's like, I'm
Yes.
looking through like all of this, and he's like, I just can't believe.
Now I'm still here.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Oof.
yeah. So it's quiet on it's
It's
called Quiet on
yeah.
Set. I believe it's streaming on Max.
HBO. Yeah, Max.
You can
Sorry,
probably get it
streaming
through any
Max.
type of like
I think
a lot of like
YouTube.
cable TV, like
Yeah,
YouTube TV.
any of the big streaming places. I think
Yeah.
Hulu has it. It's definitely a good watch. You just have to be prepared for it.
Mhm.
So, so if you're not in the mood to like be emotional, don't watch it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And then again, we preface the episode with this, but again, we're gonna end it on this
hmm
as well. There is a lot of heavy topics, so if any of these topics are very sensitive to you, it's probably not the best idea to watch it. But if
yes,
you just want to be informed about this and just yeah,
yep,
just there's a lot that happened that we didn't know about, and I'm glad that these people are starting to tell their stories and
yes,
bring this to light. And I just hope that if there's you just hope that anybody that's going through this is gonna be able to tell their
yeah,
story, and
hmm
it comes down to healing is what
yes,
I want to say, is
and
the healing is what's
hopefully,
most important, is for hoping that all these the victims find their
yes,
peace.
hopefully Drake is finding his peace and
Yeah,
everyone
and
else.
everyone else that went
Yeah,
through it, all the cast of all that, Amanda, I see her on TikTok and I see the way that she's been posting, but people have been noting, and it's a positive thing. I'm gonna end this on like a hopeful note. They are noticing that like she's getting a little bit more positive. Like her voice sounded a little bit
yes,
more monotone when she started out, but now they are noticing that like she's talking about like her ambitions in life. Like she wants to become like a nail technician and she wants to
yes,
open a salon and she's applying for um the license to do that. So it's
yes.
like there is hope for healing,
Yes, it just
and I'm
even if it takes years, like it's been what 20 years,
close to that.
yeah, since all this came out, and
Mhm.
now listening to Drake, you can see that he's like trying to move forward with it,
Mhm.
and so hopefully everyone else in the cast can. Anyone else going through it just in their own lives, maybe this
Yeah.
is a good watch. It's probably hard to watch it, but maybe this is something that can help other people. And they
Heal
do
and
in
process
yeah, and they do at the
their
end of
experiences.
each section. At the end, they do like the national hotline.
Yeah, for sexual
Yep.
assault. It's very important. And I think I think we can also put that in the description just in case if
Yes.
anybody happens to come across this episode, just know that those resources are there. And
Yes.
even now more so than they were
Oh,
even
yep.
for even like a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
It's all about just getting the information, making sure people are able to tell their experiences and heal.
Yes.
And that's
As
all that we
long
can hope
as
for.
it doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as you just continue to move forward and do your best, all you can ask for.
I agree.
Well, we'll see you next week
Yep.
with some more positive, well, I say positive, but less concerning, you know, topics.
Material. But again, this was just
Yes.
something that we really did have to
Oh, yes.
discuss.
Yeah, and I hope that other people continue to discuss it and it gets put out there as much as possible.
All right. I'll catch you
Bye.
guys later.